Stitched, Mira Black hashtag 8.5. Chapter 1. The wind coursed around us, over Blaz's wings, and then swirling through my hair. Another day, perhaps the cold would have chilled me deep into my bones. But not that day. Not with having said goodbye to Liam. Not with having to leave him behind in the fire, burning so that we might live. I clutched my middle, still processing that I was pregnant. Zane, Millie's child, snuggled into his blankets and I held him tightly. His green eyes were wide, as they took in the clouds blistering past us. He wore the fire opal which kept his tiny body warm against that cold. And holding him, I caught the tail end of that heat. I touched his forehead, running my finger down the bridge of his nose, his skin so very soft. His green eyes blinked closed and then slowly opened. I did it again, twice more, and his eyes stayed closed. At least he was safe now, or Ian wouldn't find him, wouldn't be able to possess him. I lay my right hand on my midsection once more while I cradled Zane with my left arm. How could it be that I was so oblivious to my own body over the last few months? Looking back, I could see the signs, the excess fatigue, the strange nausea now and again, the way my heart was so damn tender. Blaz's voice was gentle as he spoke directly to me, leaving the others with us out of the conversation. How could you know when you were so busy fighting for your life, for the lives of your friends? I didn't hear her speak until Liam told you. Mira, you had other things far more pressing. I blinked back tears. Fuck it. No one could see them anyway. Eric was in front of me, his broad back taking the brunt of the cold air, and then Coyote was behind me. Being a guardian like Liam had been, his body ran hot, and between the two men and Zane with his fire opal, I was not that uncomfortable. But her? I focused my thoughts on Blaz. Are you sure I'm having a girl? He tipped his head back and to the side so I could see his eye. Yes. She was staying quiet at the request of her father, so as to not give you another thing to worry about. A sob rippled up in my chest, and I buried my head against my uncle's back. Eric reached back and patted my leg. It will be okay, no matter how bad it is now. If we aren't done, if we aren't in the ground, it isn't over, and we will find a way to make it okay. We flew away from England, away from my friends and allies, to a place only Coyote knew. A place that, according to Liam, was cut out from the world and would allow me the time to give birth. To have our child without worrying about a demon attempting to posses her or Zane. Tian Shan, Blaz said. Don't say it out loud, but that is the place we go. A place of safety that even a tracker couldn't find. I let his words slide through me, my mind latching onto what he was saying. Like the castle with Peter's wolf pack. The dragon tipped his head, far enough that I could see him again. Yes, a pocket cut out of the world, cut out of even the veil in order to be a place of safety. On that note, we need to stop and pick up someone who promised to help. I didn't realize how long we'd been flying with my grief and thoughts consuming me. Now that I looked, we were over a rather familiar section of land. Still, there was nothing but snow, trees, and mountains, but I recognized the wide, open field we were coming up to. Not the clearing. I whispered, knowing Blaz would hear me no matter how quiet I was. He didn't slow, but instead flew past the open field which allowed me to breathe again. The clearing, where Liam had made love to me in the snow, where we'd started our last real adventure together. If I'd known then that I would lose him, I would have fought to stay there, hidden in the forest, to hide in the wilderness of Russia and let the world go to hell in a poorly woven handbasket. Screw the world. I wanted my love back. My arms trembled as I held little Zane, and I had to force myself to breathe, to gain some semblance of control over myself. That's why he didn't tell you. I don't fucking well care the reasons why. He's still dead. I screamed into the wind. Behind me, Coyote jumped, but Eric didn't move a muscle. Zane's eyes opened, and he started to cry. I bent my head over him, rocking him gently, guilt and grief warring with one another. Coyote handed me a bottle. I put it against the fire opal to heat it, and then popped it into the still screaming baby's mouth. No one corrected me for yelling and waking Zane, nor did they tell me to shut the fuck up. Of course, Eric had known Liam's plan, as had Coyote, and Dorian he'd known too, the bastard. The only question I had was, who had killed Liam? who had wielded the copper knife that had sliced through all that made Liam a guardian and allowed his blood to flow, sealing shut the veil. And what would I do to them? He'd asked them to do it, whoever it was. That much was truth. Right now, though, that was the least of my worries, much as I hated to admit it, even to myself. A groan slipped out of me, and I leaned forward again, pressing my face against Eric's back. I wasn't alone, but maybe I wanted to be. To grieve without everyone's eyes on me. To see their pity and sorrow leaking from them like water through a sieve. The ground rushed up, and I braced for the impact, but Blas landed lightly, hopping once to ease the landing. In front of us, a snow-covered field led up to what had been a run-down castle the last time I'd been there. Which wasn't that long ago. But now, the castle fairly glistened in the weak winter sun. Figures dashed about on the turrets, and from the moat near the gate, a triangular head lifted from the water. The water dragon's scales caught the light and flashed blue and silver, not all that different from Blas's coloring really. I tightened my arms around Zane, who let out a content sigh, burped, and went back to sleep. Who are we picking out? Katya. He said her name, and she was running across the field, her parents behind her, yelling. Somehow those little legs outran her parents with ease, even when her father shifted into his wolf form. No, we can't take another child. I did my best to keep my voice low. Not your choice, niece, Eric said, his voice soft. We all make choices, and even though she is young, her soul is older than all of ours combined. Katya will make her own decisions. The little girl scrambled up Blas's leg, her mother and father, Peter, skidding to a stop. Do not take her, please. Around us the air shifted, and I tensed. This is going to get weird. One of Katya's abilities was to project images into another person's mind, showing them what she wanted them to see and hear. A little like Blas could, but with far more force and detail. The scene in front of me changed to one where Katya was older, maybe in her teens, and she stood guard over the sleeping forms of two children, a dark-haired little boy and a copper-haired little girl. Their hands were tangled together, and all around them the world spun and twisted. But Katya stood firm, guarding them. I blinked, and the image faded. Katya was beside me. I told your mate I would guard his little girl. I come now to do that. Her mother let out a sob, but she bowed her head. Come back to us one day, please. Katya smiled. Goodbye, Mama. I will be back. Peter let out a howl, his grizzled wolf form shuddering with what I could only assume was grief. How would I feel if my child left me? A thought struck me hard, as if someone had thrown a rock and smashed me in my stupid head. I was leaving my little girl in order to stop Orion. Leave her behind in the care of others, maybe to say goodbye and never see her again. And like me, she would have no one. A spasm went through me, tightening every muscle in my body in one horrible twist. I fought to breathe around the pain lancing through me. Not a physical pain. My heart unhinging, knocking down every last barrier I had up. Someone was sobbing, and I distantly recognized that I had finally snapped. There had been too many losses, too many pains for me to deal any longer with any sort of rationality. Arms circled me, holding me against a strong chest that I knew was my uncle's. Blas launched into the air, and I felt him inside my head, trying to get me to allow him to help me. I blocked him, something I'd never been able to do before, forcing his thoughts out of mine. Nothing could help me. How much would I be asked to give up, to sacrifice to stop Orion? How much could the world expect from me, and think I would still be able to function? Tears dripped off my chin, splotching on his Zane's blanket. He slept through my breakdown, his chest rising and falling slowly. Katya reached around me to touch him, and while I could apparently keep Blas out of my head, I couldn't keep her out. We'll be okay. Trust and love. Liam knew this. Love is best. Let grief go. The words of an innocent, to believe that love conquered all. That's bullshit, kid. You might as well learn it now, that everything you love is either taken from you or killed. That's life, fucked up as it might be. My words were slurred with pain, like I'd drunk 1,000 bottles of grief, only to find at the bottom there was no end. Katya's fingers tightened on my arm, and her golden eyes, so like Liam's that I could barely breathe past seeing her, forced me to listen to her. You will see. Pain and love, they are married. But without pain, love would not be powerful like it is. That made no fucking sense. I didn't try to stop the tears, cradled in my uncle's arms like a child, holding Zane close. I drifted in and out of sleep. My dreams bunched together in my head, fire and blood, pain and love, the past, present, and possible future all clamoring for my attention. Hours passed. I fed Zane several times until I began to worry we would run out of formula. That was the whole of what I could handle, feeding and loving that little boy. Millie's boy. Ah, fuck. I whispered, a new wave of pain crashing over me. I thought I'd seen her die, splayed out on the floor of Orion's castle. But now I knew the truth. Orion had staunched her blood and kept her alive. To use her again, to make her a tool for him. Millie, her name, whispered from my lips, was torn away, stolen by the icy wind. I don't know how long it took, but we went from flying high over mountains and through clouds to landing in a courtyard. My eyes were fuzzy with fatigue, and everything looked strange. Like I was staring at a place from a painting, the walls done in a faint orange. The footing below us interlocked tiles, each one painted with a creature. A dragon, a werewolf, a griffin, a goblin. There was a tile for every supernatural creature I'd heard of, and a few I hadn't. Where are we? Coyote answered, sober, his voice dull. We can say it now that we are here. Tian Shan, the one place you will be safe from Orion's minions. From any demon left behind when the veil closed. From those who would end your life and the life of the child you carry. Blaz blew out a sharp breath, fogging the air up around us. We have a problem. I'm not the only dragon here. Chapter 2. The four of us slid off Blaz's back as he reared up and spread his wings. His neck arched back as if he would blast the intruder with his flames. A flash of red and gold, violet eyes, and a wingspan that matched Blaz's stunned me. A dragon, yes, but one we knew well. Ophelia, what the fuck are you doing here? The female dragon ducked her head, drawing closer, but keeping her body in a submissive posture. I came here to heal. Blaz snorted. You mean to hide? Her violet eyes blazed, and she slammed her head upward and into his exposed throat, sending him tumbling backward. I may no longer have a rider, but I can still kick your ass, Blaz. Their argument was broadcasted to all of us by the look on Eric's and Coyote's faces. Eric was fighting a smile, and Coyote just shook his head as he muttered, dragons. With my feet on the ground, I took a good look around. We were in a monastery, the stone walls rising higher than the dragons' heads. The walls, that deep orange color I'd first seen through hazy eyes, stood out against the snow and ice covering the tops of them. The monastery was large, bigger than I would have expected, that was for sure. From what I could see, it covered several acres of the mountainside it was built into, and we were in the main courtyard if the large gated doors behind us were any indication. Zane started to fuss, and I rocked him gently. It's all right, little man. You're safe here. A weight I didn't know had been on my shoulders slid off, and I let out a breath that felt as though I'd been holding it for days, maybe weeks. You're safe. The sound of running feet snapped my head up, and I crouched with Zane in my arms, holding him with my left and pulling a sword with my right. Safe we might be, but I wasn't going to take any chances. 3 monks. They couldn't be anything else with their long, flapping orange robes and completely bald heads, ran toward us. They were young for monks. I could see it on their faces, the smooth skin, and belief in their eyes that all was well with the world. Boy, were they going to get a fucking shock as the world shit all over that. Blaz tipped his head toward me. That was particularly bitter, my friend. I shrugged, but didn't lower my sword. The monk in the middle stepped forward, placed his hands palms together, and bowed low. Welcome to Tian Shan. Be at ease, blood of the lost. We have waited many years for you. Come, we will show you to your room. I frowned and lowered the tip of my sword, fully expecting I would have to use it at some point. What's your name? He smiled, his grin spreading across his face. Bow. I'm Mira. The others introduced themselves one at a time, except for Katya, who was suddenly clinging to my leg. I stay with you, Mira. You and the babies. The girl stays with me. I said, and Bao nodded. Of course. Please, do not be afraid. It is safe here, truly safe. I had a hard time believing that. But even I knew it was rude to point out how fucking ignorant he was when we were here to partake of his and his monastery's hospitality. With Katya hanging off my leg, I followed Bao. I didn't care where Eric and Coyote went. Now that we were, supposedly, safe, I remembered clearly they had been part of the plot to end Liam's life, and I wanted to put as much distance between myself and them as possible. Zane let out a mewl, and I paused. Shit, I'm running out of formula. Ah, we have several nursing mothers. Perhaps one of them would be able to help. Bao smiled as he spoke, a definite twinkle in his eye. Come, I will introduce you. The baby will likely not wait on your time or mind to be hungry. We backtracked and took a turn to the left, followed a winding pathway through the monastery that seemed to go on forever. The hallway opened into a large room, the ceilings at least 20 feet high, the floors set in river rock that clicked under my boots. In the center of the room was a large table that had so much food on it, I thought I could see the heavy slab sag in the middle. A number of people sat around the table, laughing and talking softly, the murmur just audible and not enough to decipher words. Alex would be in heaven with all that food. My heart gave a lurch, reminding me how much I'd given up, of the people I loved and deserted to come here. I had abandoned them, left them to fend for themselves. No, they understand. Mira, you do this so we can all be safe. Be kind to yourself, my friend. Be kind. Blaz's words were a hollow comfort. Throat tightening, I looked up at the ceiling, inspecting the rafters, as if the answer to all my problems would be written there. Daisy, Bao called out, bowing over his hands. I have someone I'd like you to meet. Zane let out another of his mewling cries, and I rocked him gently, feeling awkward. Tiny babies were not something I'd spent a lot of time with, and I felt like it showed. A feminine figure stepped away from the table. She was taller than me, her hair braided back from her pale pink skin. Pink? As she drew closer, I saw only the troll in her. Like Tara, the half-breed who'd helped Liam. But this wasn't Tara, just some unknown supernatural. I crouched over Zane as I whipped out a blade with my other hand. That's close enough. Daisy stopped in her tracks. I am a half-breed, but I do not favor my father's side. She blinked several times, her wide brown eyes taking me in with a single sweep. Her shoulders straightened and her lips trembled. She could have been Tara's sister. They were so similar in looks. I slowly came out of my crouch, my arms aching from having held Zane non-stop for hours. I know you're a half-breed. What the hell? What human would? Katya's voice inside my head stopped me. Her mother was taken by her father without consent. I stared down at her. You know, you are far too young to understand that. She shrugged. My soul is old, and I see people's hearts, their past, and what makes them who they are. I didn't want to ask her what she saw when she looked inside me. I didn't need to know. Or maybe I already knew. So, she's good? Katya nodded. Zane let out a pitiful, mournful cry that tugged at my heart. It's all right, little man. Daisy stepped closer. I can feed him if you like. How did one ask tactfully if troll human breast milk was okay for a child born of a witch? You sure it won't poison him? Yup. Nice and subtle like. Daisy laughed softly, her eyes sparkling with humor. I've nursed several children of different supernaturals, and all of them have grown straight and true. My milk is rich. Lips pursed, I reluctantly handed Zane to her. She cradled him with an ease I envied. Hush, my boy, hush. With one hand, she spread her shirt and slipped a bright pink, and I mean nearly neon in shade, nipple into his searching mouth. His mewling eased as she stood, nursing him quietly. Bao cleared his throat and touched me gently on the elbow. Come, I will take you to your room. I hesitated. I can't leave him. I don't know who the fuck she is other than her name. Daisy smiled at me, seemingly nonplussed by my reaction to her. I will have to feed him every few hours. You're welcome to stay with me if you like. I nodded before Bao could say anything else. Good. Then I'll stay with you. The monk bowed, a half smile on his lips. Of course. Eat, rest, and know that you are safe here, blood of the lost, tracker. He turned and left us standing. Daisy with Zane nursing in her arms, me with a blade still in my hand, and a kid clinging to my thigh. You hungry, Katya? She nodded, and I pried her from my leg so I could take her hand. Let's eat. We sat, and Daisy lowered herself to the bench beside me. The monk, he called you a tracker. Is that true? I gave a slow nod as I scooped food onto a plate for Katya. Yes. Why? You have someone you want me to look for? A part of me hoped she did. The distraction would be welcome. The other part of me hoped she didn't. Her smile was hesitant. No, I have my children here. They were saved. By Tara. She said a guardian was with her, and that his woman was a tracker. I assumed that is you? I gave a nod, keeping my eye on the food as I spooned it onto my plate, just staring as she continued to speak. Is he well, the guardian? Is he here? I would like to thank him for helping her. They saved many of our children. Katya's hand rested lightly on my thigh, but she was silent. I cleared my throat. He's dead. Daisy made a sound deep in her throat, like a growl and a groan. I'm sorry. It was recent then. Fuck. I did not want to talk about this. So I stuffed my face. I didn't know what it was I ate, didn't care. Couldn't really taste it anyway over the grief that filled my body. Who knew grief tasted like anything, yet it was like that. The salt of tears turned into a crazy volume of pain filling my belly. I couldn't escape it, so I kept shoveling food into my mouth. Alex would have been proud. Then again, I needed to eat. I knew that much. I hadn't been taking good care of myself, and I had to do that now, had to, for the sake of. My brain stuttered over saying it, even inside myself. My daughter. I put my fork down, wiped my face with a napkin, and slid from the bench. Katya, stay and eat. I didn't look at her or Daisy, just strode from the room until I found a door that opened into the fresh mountain air and promptly puked up every last thing that I'd just eaten. On my hands and knees, it took me a good minute to realize I wasn't alone. And I wasn't on cobblestone or rock, but warm, white sand. Fingers digging into the almost silken silt below me. I fought to breathe as I eyed up the man lying on flat out in front of me. He was on his back, his arms behind his head, and a smile on his face. Flaming red hair topped his head like a mini bonfire. He said nothing, and I slowly backed out of the room. I wasn't here to make friends, nor did I care why he was here or what he was hiding from. I made my way back to the huge dining room. Daisy was rocking Zane, who'd apparently had his fill of milk. Katya bounced beside her, clamoring to see the little boy. Easing back around the corner, I leaned against the stone and slid to the floor. Liam said only take Coyote and Eric with me, but I was already regretting not bringing Alex. I missed him, missed his candor and warmth, missed his unrepentant humor. Fucking rabbits, I whispered to myself, the memory making me smile. And then cry. The pad of tiny paws on the floor brought my head up. A gray and white house cat trotted toward me. Tail erect, her green eyes took one look at me, and she leapt into my lap, purring. Instinctively, I circled her with my arms and pulled her tightly to my face, hiding my tears against her soft fur. She wasn't Alex, not by a long shot, but she was a hell of a lot better than I'd been expecting. Holding her tight, I stood and stumbled toward where I thought Bao had said my room was. Opening a door at random, there was a made bed, and that's all I wanted. I kicked off my boots, slid a dagger under my pillow, and shed the rest of my weapons. Lowering myself to the coverings, I groaned as the mattress sagged under me. Laying back, cat curled up against my chest, I closed my eyes and prayed for sleep to keep me. That when I woke, all this would have been a nightmare. That Liam would be beside me, and I wouldn't be alone. Chapter 3. Yes, I knew it was a dream because he was dead. Liam stood in front of me, his golden eyes alive with all that I could hope for. Mira, I told you I wouldn't leave you. Enough tears. You need to save your energy for our girl. My jaw twitched, and I was barely able to hold back from swinging at him. Laughing, he grabbed my arms. I see it in you and know what you're up to. Don't think I don't know you. He pulled me close, bent his head so his dark hair fell forward, brushing my face. Kiss me. I didn't argue, but pressed myself to him, kissing him as if he were the only thing I needed to live. Here, I could stay here forever. I would give up everything to stand with him, to know he wouldn't be taken from me again. No tears, he whispered against my lips, his hands cupping my face and brushing the tears away with his thumbs. How can I not? You're telling me you wouldn't fucking well grieve if I died. I leaned back so I could look him in the face, anger rearing its head within me. He snorted softly and tightened his grip on me. I'm not really gone, and besides, I know what's coming. I need you to not be afraid, and our girl needs you to be the brave one you have been up till now. Our girl. I lowered my head. How can I be a good mom? I'm leaving her here, aren't I? That's why you said to take Eric with me. Liam nodded. It's the only place safe for her and Zane. They have a story yet to live in this world, and the only way you'll ever allow her, that is to leave her behind and face Orion on your own. This isn't fair. I whispered the words, feeling like a child and not really caring. If there was anyone I could be honest with, it was Liam. No, it isn't fair. But in the end, it will be okay. You have to trust that. Easy for you to say, O'Shea. I grumped at him, but again, didn't pull away. I had a feeling that the minute I let go, the dream would end. I wanted to stay where I was for as long as possible. Almost as if reading my mind, Liam untangled his arms from around me. Time for me to go, love. I will be here each night that you stay in Tianshan, until she is born. I grabbed at him, and after I leave, his smile was sad, and I knew he didn't have to say it. No, he didn't have to say a thing for me to know I wouldn't get any more from him. I woke with a start, the soft, warm body of a cat on one side of me, and Katya curled up behind me, breathing lightly. Sun streamed through the window above the bed, and I forced myself out of the warmth holding me between the two tiny bodies. They slid toward one another, Katya sliding an arm over the cat who looked up at me, her green eyes irritated. Suddenly, I felt the need to apologize. Sorry, she's young and needs a lot of love. Hope you don't mind a little werewolf clinging to you. The cat let out a sneeze and lowered her head, so she rested on Katya's cheek. They made a sweet picture. I made my way through the nearly silent hallways. Nothing but the sound of my feet and the odd scratch of a bug or some such. Sending out a thread, I tracked my uncle. Or at least, I tried to. Nothing came back to me and a cold sweat broke out over my back. Fucking hell, what now? Why would he leave? I was jogging before I thought better of it, running for the dining room. I skidded to a stop at the site in front of me. Eric and a whole host of supernaturals sat around the dining table, laughing and eating. By the looks of Coyote dancing on the top of the table, he was in the middle of a story of some sort. Over our heads, the ceiling was open and Ophelia and Blas had their heads stuck inside so they could take part. What the fuck is going on? I whispered to myself. Was I still dreaming? I blinked several times, the scene just a little weird, even for me. I started toward the table, and Daisy stood, waving to me. Mira, come see the little man. Quickening my steps, I realized I'd left my weapons in my room. What was wrong with me? Daisy handed me Zane, who blinked sleepy, green eyes up at me. I cradled him lightly and sat beside Daisy, who patted me on the shoulder. You're a natural. You'll do fine when your little one comes. I stiffened and glared at my uncle across from me who shook his head. I didn't say anything, so no need to shoot daggers at me, niece. Oh, no one said anything, Daisy said, smiling. You fairly glow with it. I didn't want to glow with anything, but my stomach rumbled and I found myself drooling over the heaping piles of meat in front of me. I avoided the greens and the vegetables, digging in deep to the eggs, bacon, sausage, and ham. I cleaned off a plate one-handed while I held Zane. Maybe Daisy was right. Maybe I did have a bit of a knack. Do you know when you're due? Daisy asked, and I froze mid-bite. No, not really. I can tell you if you don't mind me touching your belly, she offered almost shyly. I swallowed my mouthful of food and then nodded. I turned to her, so I straddled the bench. Okay. I leaned to one side, handing Zane to Eric. He took the little boy with no issue, bouncing him lightly. Lift your shirt. I need to have contact with your skin, she said. I lifted my shirt, looking down at my belly. There was no obvious bump, no rounding of my body at all. I said as much to her, and she laughed. Well, every pregnancy is different. You're loaded with muscle. It will keep your shape. Well, in shape better than someone who is soft. Her hands were warm as she pressed them, one just above my belly button, the other below, brushing the top of my low-cut jeans. Eyes closed, she kept her hands firm against me as she hummed softly. A girl, but you knew that already. I stayed quiet, realizing the joviality that I'd come into the room hearing had gone silent as we all listened to Daisy. She's healthy, but her blood, it isn't like yours. She will take after her father and be a guardian, not a tracker. A sigh of relief slipped over me. As a guardian, she would be damn hard to kill and wouldn't have the pull of responsibility on her that I did as a tracker. That's good. Daisy smiled, but still kept her eyes closed. She won't be ready to come for at least 4 months. That would be the earliest. I frowned. That would only give me 2 months if I was lucky with her. And now that I knew I was pregnant, I wanted as much time as I could have with my child. Are you sure? Yes, you are 4 months along, maybe a little more, but not much. She opened her eyes and took her hands from me. I lowered my shirt. Shit, that isn't a lot of time with her. Eric tapped the table. Worse, it doesn't give you a great deal of recovery time. The end game is coming, and you need to be ready for it. Fuck, I didn't forget that, Eric, I snapped at him. But right now, I can only focus on one thing, and that thing is my daughter. Zane let out a squawk, and Daisy reached for him, settling him easily onto her breast. He was a noisy little bugger, slurping and drinking, milk trickling down his chin. There is a way to speed up your pregnancy, she said, her eyes lowering. I don't want to end the pregnancy, I said, stabbing my fork into another piece of meat. Didn't matter to me what kind of meat, as long as it was thick and juicy. I realized I was eating the way Liam had. Meat, meat, meat. No, of course not. Daisy spluttered, her eyes going wide as they filled with shock. No, there's a way to make the child grow faster so you give birth sooner. Perhaps as soon as a month. Images of Millie laying on the stone floor in Orion's castle deep within the veil, giving birth to Zane far earlier than she should have because of something the demon had done to her made me cringe. I've seen something like that with a friend. It sure as shit didn't look like a good idea to me. Daisy nodded. Well, perhaps they did not do it right. If the spell laid on the mother is twisted too much, then there can be problems. There is no one within the monastery who can help you with that. You will have to step outside the safety of this place to find someone. I chewed my mouth full as I mulled over her words. Having the baby sooner would be good all around. I'd have more time to recover, as Eric pointed out. More importantly, I'd have time to spend with my daughter, Liam's daughter. The meat in my mouth suddenly didn't want to go down my throat, and I spit it back onto my plate. I pushed myself out of my chair and headed for my room, the world spinning crazily. My reactions were driven by grief and hormones, but knowing that and controlling it were two different things. Katya and the cat still slept in a tiny, heaped bundle, but the girl woke as I came in. Her eyes followed me, golden and so solemn I could see the old soul in her as clearly as if she had "I'm older than I look" fool painted across her forehead. There were clothes folded at the foot of the bed, and I lifted one corner of the material. A deep orange hunk of cloth hung from my hand. Not going to happen, I muttered and dropped the robe onto the bed. I let out a sigh and did a complete turn of the room. Slowing my breathing, I sent out a thread to track the monk who welcomed us, Bao. Again, no response, and a trickle of sweat broke out along the back of my neck. Katya, can you help me find Bao? She bobbed her head and slid off the bed, her bare feet barely touching the floor before she was off and running. I jogged after her. Why the hell wasn't I able to track him or Eric? There was no way I was across a large body of water from the monk. I tried to track Coyote and got the same nothingness back. The sweat that had been a minor trickle slid down my back, soaking my t-shirt in the cool air, twisting and turning through the dusky, dry corridors of the monastery. She brought us to a doorway that opened into a courtyard bursting with color. Grass so green it seemed to vibrate stood ankle-high, flowers and trees heavily laden with petals, fruit, and buzzing bees. Katya hopped ahead of me, then mid-stride, shifted into her wolf form. A small, golden wolf pup let out a yip and bolted away, chasing the bees that floated lazily in the air. Feeling footwear was not necessary, or maybe more importantly, not welcome. I slid my boots off and stepped into the courtyard. The ground was warm and soft against my feet, The sense of belonging and calm that slid from the earth and into my body was more than welcome. I let out a sigh. The easy flows through the soul. Does it not, tracker? I lifted my head to see Bao in front of me, his hands clasped. How did someone so young come to run the show here? He smiled and gave a slight nod of his head. Youth does not preclude wisdom. But that is not the question you have for me, is it? Damn, he was good. Why can't I track here? Bao beckoned me to walk with him, and we started around the edge of the unnatural garden side by side. The walls and grounds were blessed 1,000 years ago to be a safe haven for those seeking sanctuary. The catch was that all within would have their abilities dampened, to keep them from using such abilities on each other. Katya can still shift, I pointed out as she bounced out of a bush in front of us, her teeth bared at a flower. That is her nature, not an ability. The difference is slight, but it still stands. You have all your limbs while you are here, as she has all of hers, even if one of those limbs involves 4 feet and a tail. I chewed my bottom lip, thinking about what Daisy said. You have another question. He didn't look at me, just kept walking slowly, hands tucked inside of the sleeves of his voluminous robe. I want to have this baby sooner than later. Bao's eyebrows dipped low. So, you can go back to your life? I stopped, forcing him to stop and face me. No, so I can have time with her before I have to go and face Orion. Damn, I was really spilling the beans. More so than I'd ever done with someone I'd just met. Again, he seemed to know what I was thinking even though I said nothing. Your secrets are safe here, tracker. And to have your pregnancy sped up for your own convenience, I would not help you. But for saving the world and spending time with your daughter before you have to leave her, well, that is different. A weight lifted from my shoulders. Who do I have to find to help me? And what will they want in exchange? There are 3 old women who live at the base of the mountain. They can help you, but their price is often higher than those seeking help wish to pay. His eyes softened around the edges, and he reached out to take my hand, cupping it between his two. Be careful if you choose to ask for their help. Backing away from him, I nodded. Leaving Bao and Katya in the unnatural garden, I made my way to my room. The cat was awake, her paws tucked under her as she stared at me, eyes half-masked. I lifted an eyebrow at her. You got something to say, cat? She yawned and stretched her back, then shook her head, almost like she was really answering me. Without so much as a meow, she left me in my room alone, which didn't last long. A rap of knuckles on the door, and then Eric strode in. I know you're pissed at me, but you can't ignore your responsibilities. He pulled a large violet-skinned book from under his leather trench coat and handed it to me. My fingertips tingled as I took the tome. I'll read it. I promise, Uncle, I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. You'd best, because that is the only guide you have to defeating a demon who has killed everyone and everything in his path to get where he is. He reached out and tapped the book with an index finger. This is the only hope the world has that you will figure out what you need to do. I grimaced. Thanks for the reminder. I slid the book off my lap and slowly stood. Before I get to my homework, though, I have something I need to do. You do mean to speed up the pregnancy then? I let out a slow breath. Yeah, that. Did I even have another choice? There was barely enough time as it was, even with Liam's sacrifice. So that was that. I would do this thing and pray to all the gods I didn't kill myself or the child in doing so. Chapter 4. There's no other choice. I brushed past him and headed down the long hallway to the front gates. Eric dropped a heavy hand on my shoulder. You might want to bundle up, then. Can't be that cold. I was just in a courtyard with Bao that was loaded with flowers and shit. Mira. This place is blessed and cursed in a way I never thought I'd see. It is damn cold outside these walls, and you need to be warm. If not for you, then for your child. He was right. I let him help me find warm clothes, and then we went to find Blas. Hey, Lizard, where are you? I was sleeping. Thank you very much. I felt him yawn and stretch, and I headed toward him. I guess being able to talk mind to mind with Blas was not an ability so much as something innate in me. Yes, that felt right. We found him on top corner of the monastery, curled around a turret, Ophelia wrapped up with him. I need a trip down the mountain. You up for a flyabout? Not far? No, not far. With a grumble and a small blast of flame, he untangled himself and dropped to the ground in front of me. Eric and I climbed on a Blaz's back, cinching ourselves into the leather rigging he wore. Without asking if we were ready, the dragon launched into the air, wings sending a powerful downdraft into the monastery. A few bits of cloth were caught up in the swirl of air currents, tossed about without mercy. I knew how they felt. I wasn't able to escape the feeling that no matter what I did, or who I helped, or who I saved, my life wasn't my own. That the prophecies I was caught up in were too powerful even for me to face down. They'd been too much for Liam to survive. What made me think I would be any different? Blaz flew us down the mountainside, and within minutes we landed at the base in the only available place for Blaz to land. Barely large enough for the dragon, the tree branches brushed his sides as he landed with a quiet thump, muffled by the trees around us. "We'll walk from here," I said, sliding off his back and landing lightly. The warm clothes Eric had insisted on were welcome, our breath blowing billows of steam in the cold air. Around us the world was muffled, the heavy laden trees drooping under the weight of the snow. "Do you know where you're going?" Eric put a hand on my arm, and I didn't have the strength to push him away. 3 women living in a cabin at the base of a mountain. I don't think they're going to be that hard to find. Besides, if it's fate, it doesn't matter what I do. I will find them or I won't. And either way, I have no fucking say in things. I pulled away from him and then gasped. Right in front of us was a huge snow leopard. Hell, we'd almost walked right into him with the way his fur blended into the background. The crunch of snow under huge padded paws was the only sound beside the blowing wind as he crept toward us. I kept still, a part of me wondering if I'd suddenly become suicidal. I hadn't brought any of my weapons with me, and the only thing that saved me was Eric. He grabbed my arm and jerked me away from the leopard. I fell backwards, my world nothing but a bright white canvas for a split second, and then I was gasping and pushing my way out of the white drift. The leopard was sitting on its haunches, watching, head tipped slightly to one side, green eyes wide. Kind of like it wasn't really a snow leopard. I narrowed my eyes, and the second sight image of the leopard flickered, and I thought I saw a familiar gray and white housecat for a brief moment. "Are you more than you look?" I spit out along with a hunk of snow that had turned to slush inside my mouth. The wide head bobbed once, and beside me, I felt Eric relax. "Her name is Peta," Blaz said. "You can trust her." "Thanks," I muttered. The dragon snorted, and I pushed to my feet. "You want to lead us to the 3 ladies of the mountain?" Another head bob, and the leopard wove her way through the trees, following a path not visible until your feet were on it. "You sure you want to follow a cat?" I snorted. I've been following all manner of creatures for the last 6 months, some far more sketchy than an oversized house cat. Eric grunted, and we walked in that awkward silence again. He swore us to secrecy. Fuck, I do not want to talk about Liam. Not right now. Why not? We're here alone, and you need to let it out. I know you're pissed with us, furious even that we would help Liam die. I also know a part of you understands. Because if you didn't, I'd have fucking killed you already. I finished for him, knowing it was the truth. Maybe it was hormones. Maybe it was the cold numbing my usual reticence to spilling the beans. But whatever it was, I spit out what I'd been thinking all along. No one trusted me enough to see it was the only way to stop things. As much as losing Liam hurts, it hurts more that he didn't think I could handle things. That he thought I wouldn't do what needed to be done. That he kept secrets from me, and now just fucked off and died and left me to clean up the mess. He didn't think well enough of me to. I paused and sucked in a lungful of sharp, clean air. It doesn't matter now. Yes, I'm pissed at you and Coyote and Doran. Yes, I want to know who killed Liam, but I'm more pissed at him for fucking well not talking to me. I didn't realize I was shouting until the leopard in front of us turned to stare at me. Pity flooded the creature's eyes, and that undid me. I dropped to my knees, a sob tearing out of my throat as I slammed a hand over my traitorous mouth. A soft, furred head butted against me, and instinctively, I wrapped my arms around the leopard's neck. I clung to the cat, my body and heart battered, my belief in the world gone. I didn't think things would turn out. I didn't think they would be okay. I didn't know how I was supposed to go on and leave my daughter behind when the time came. I'd only known about her for a few days, and yet I knew what it was to be abandoned. How could I do that to her? Niece, Eric spoke softly. First things first, we need to get your little girl here. Let's focus on bringing her into the world safely before we do anything else. Fuck, he was right, but my emotions were all over the map. I ran a hand over the leopard's head, ears, and neck. Thanks. Waffling in my ear, the cat stepped back and tipped her head once more. I stood and followed in silence. While the outburst had been coming, and I had no doubt there would be more, the truth of what I'd said helped. I would have initially fought to keep Liam alive, of course I would have. But if they could have explained to me why he had to die, then I could have at least been prepared for it. The shock of his death would have been eased, and we could have had time to say goodbye properly. And then there was the baby. I placed a hand over my midsection. A child of Liam's. Of mine. As much as I would have fought for Liam to stay with me, if I'd known then that the child's life had been on the line, then I could have done what needed to be done. Did my friends and family think so little of me? Or maybe, had I only ever shown them that I couldn't be trusted with the hard decisions, that I didn't have the strength to do what needed to be done to save those I loved? The questions and fears, grief and anger swirled through me as cold as the snow-swept mountain air swirled around my head. The leopard paused, her tail twitching at the tip as she surveyed the small, open, snow-covered meadow in front of us. I saw nothing to be concerned about and almost said so when Eric grabbed my arm and put a finger to his lips. I clenched my teeth and stared into the meadow. The leopard stepped forward, inching her way closer to the invisible line between meadow and path. Dropping to her belly, she did a classic cat stalk, body wriggling inch by inch, while we stood back and watched. I wasn't in a hurry. There was no big deadline or rush, so I stood with more patience than I'd had in a long time. The call of an owl, the steady hoot given 3 times, seemed to be a signal. The leopard burst from the snow, covering the ground in huge leaping strides that had her in the middle of the meadow in seconds. And then she disappeared, as if she'd stepped across the veil. But that wasn't possible. That couldn't be. Liam had sealed the veil with his blood, making it impossible to travel that way. Eric stepped forward, putting himself where the leopard had stayed crouched. Let me go first. Count to 10, then follow. Without another word, he bolted across the meadow, disappearing too in the exact spot the snow leopard had. Well, fuck, I muttered. I refused to run. Why? Stubborn maybe. Tired absolutely. I walked out into the meadow, the rustle of my feet in the snow the only sound at first. And then came the sound of heavy breathing and pounding feet that weren't my own, and I didn't look back. Just bolted across the meadow. Without weapons, I was not in a position to defend myself. I fell through something that gave a pop like cellophane stretched across a doorway, and as I fell, I rolled so I could see what had been chasing me. Morbid curiosity kept my eyes glued to what I was seeing. If snow and ice could take a physical form, that was what I was looking at. The creature moved like a large ape, hunched shoulders and overlong arms, but there was no doubt that it was anything but a primate. With the head that looked as though it were shoved down deep inside the neck crevice, the bright pink eyes were barely visible. Ack, ignore that beastie. He's all bark and only a little bite. I rolled to my hands and knees and pushed to my feet to see a woman in front of me. Just one, except she wasn't really just one. She was a conjoined triplet by the looks of it, a single body in the middle and a partial body hanging off each side. 3 heads, 6 arms, 2 overly thick legs, dressed in furs on top and snug pants below, almost as if she wanted you to see that she was truly conjoined. I didn't know what to say. I went with simple. Hello. Her 3 heads grinned up at me, broken teeth on each of the faces showing through. Grizzled white hair on one, dark brown on the other, and brilliant red on the third caught my eye. I looked closer. They weren't even the same age. The look to be all over the map, young, old, middle-aged. Eric cleared his throat. Sometimes fate can be a bitch. The women turned toward him, the voices speaking in a sing-song tandem. Calling us a bitch will get you nowhere, young man. I wanted to groan and put my hands over my head. Fates. And I thought I'd seen it all. Tell me you're just a witch with a funky sense of style. I can't deal with fate right now. Never mind the fates. The women laughed, the sound of their mirth filling the room. We gave up that title years ago after we dealt with the gods of our time, snipping their threads one by one. The oldest of the three said, waving one of the middle arms at me in a dismissive gesture. But we still find ourselves defending the position from time to time. No, now we are but a simple fortune teller. My shoulders slumped and fatigue washed over me. Fortune tellers. Shit. So you have no magic of your own? You can't help me then. All 6 hands shot straight into the air, and once more they spoke in unison. Help you weakened child. You seek a way to have a healthy child ahead of term? I shot a glare at Eric, and he shook his head. I said nothing. Yes. I fought with my natural inclination to be snotty. That's what I'm trying to find. But I was told you could help me with a spell. The 3 heads wove back and forth several times, like a snake trying to charm a mouse. There is a spell that will speed up the birth, but it is complicated, and the only way you would be able to make it happen is if you called on the magic of a demon. Which isn't happening. What frail hope I'd hung on slid through my fingers. So much for their help. I turned my back and started toward the door. They shuffled behind me. Or you can take your chances with this. The sound of paper fluttering turned me around. The one on the far right held a single, partially burned piece of parchment. Words were printed in red across the paper. I reached out and took the sheet from them. Venom of a guardian. Blood of a vampire. Yoke of dragons. Fire of an elemental. This is some sort of recipe? I ran a finger over the words. Yes, but you must gather the items in order. I looked at Eric, who was reading over my shoulder. What do you think? Will it work? The women cackled. Oh, it will work, blood of the lost. That we know. It will kindle the child in your belly, bringing her with a speed that will leave you plenty of time to love her. So when you leave her, the pain will be as if your heart is being torn from your body. Jaw tight. I stepped back from them. So you're doing this to make me hurt myself? 3 heads nodded in unison, grinning. Yes. Eric's hands tightened around my upper arms. Why would you want to hurt her? Pain is beauty, pain is life, pain is all there is in the end. We do her a favor. We offer her a way to hold her child sooner. What is that worth to you? The head in the middle, the oldest one, stared at me while the other 2 stared at the floor. You want something for this? We want to be there when you leave the child. When you say your goodbye. The taste of your pain. It will be exquisite. Her lips, all 3 sets, curled up into an unpleasant smile that did not reach any of her eyes. Eric put his mouth to my ear and spoke. They are like a vampire, but feeding off emotion instead of blood. A shudder slid through me, and I stared at the paper in my hand. What choice was there? I needed this to work, and if my pain was the cost, pain I would experience no matter how this turned out, what did I care if they fed off it? Done. Chapter 5. Back in the monastery, I sat in the warm garden watching Katia, trying to get the snow leopard to play with her. Across the way from me, Daisy held Zane in one arm while she watched her daughter play in the grass at her feet. At least I knew he was safe, well loved. Not that I didn't care, I just couldn't manage more than I'd done for him so far. And I was afraid to give him more of my heart. To leave one child I loved was going to be torture. I wasn't sure I could leave too. Katia bopped the leopard in the nose with a paw and let out a growl. The leopard rolled onto her back and stretched out her limbs. Amusing, and it kept my brain from thinking too hard about the list of ingredients I needed in order to make things happen. The piece of paper crinkled in my hand, and I looked down, the words jumping out at me. Blaz, I called softly, knowing he heard me regardless of the fact I was being quiet. What is a yoke of dragon? His head slid over the edge of the garden wall. Yoke of dragon? Marriage. I frowned at the paper. This is a fucking riddle then. I have 2 ingredients, a marriage and a fucking elemental. How the hell is that a spell? Blaz crept along the edge of the wall until he was behind me and could peer over my shoulder. Not that he really needed to do that, he could have picked through my mind to see what I was seeing. But he was never that disrespectful. I think that's exactly what you have. The 2 ingredients are needed. The words for the marriage vows that yoke 2 dragons together is the incantation, and likely the whole thing needs to be done over the fire of an elemental. Well, shit. How'd you get so smart? He snorted, a curl of smoke trickling out of his nose. You would have figured it out if you were at your best. And you aren't, you know that, right? You know you will not be making good decisions right now. I hunched my shoulders, but I couldn't truly argue with him. I wasn't at my best, and it tore at a piece of me that I was somehow letting down those I loved. That nothing in my life had prepared me for this pain, this uncertainty, and this ridiculous feeling of disconnection. It hit me then that I felt as though I were back in the courtroom, facing the judge, being accused of killing my little sister. There was no control, nothing I could do but hope to hell I could get through. Just like my past. No, I wouldn't allow that to happen again. Couldn't allow it. I stood, fingers clenching the paper. No, that's not true. The words were for myself. But of course Blas heard me. What will you do then? I'm going to get the Guardian Venom first. Just saying out loud, I knew I was right. I needed to focus on something other than my pain. Other than Liam. Where is Coyote? In the eating hall. Again. I made my way to the dining area, surprised that Coyote was there by himself. He sat in the middle of the table, legs crossed and eyes wide open, unblinking. Stopping a few feet from him, I reached over and touched the curve of his knee closest to me. Coyote, are you okay? Somewhat. His voice was slurred, and I looked to see if there were any empty decanters of wine. No decanters, but there was a heavy scent of herbs floating in the air. Trances are tricky, he said, his voice wavering. I've been trying to see how things go outside the walls here. Any luck? None. Damn, I'd hoped that maybe he could see how those we had left behind were doing. Alex and Pam. Doran and Eve. Keep your eyes on the prize, Black. I could almost hear Liam's voice, and for a moment I forgot he was gone. I tapped Coyote's leg again to keep his attention on me. I need the venom of a guardian. The water dragon. Does she carry venom? Please, please, please let that be the case. No, there is only one guardian who has venom. His eyes turned slowly my way. She's rather bitchy too, though in the sack, she's amazing. I swallowed a laugh and held up my hand as he opened his mouth. I don't want the details. I assume you mean Spider? I had to be sure. Even though I'd been positive, she was the only one even before I asked Coyote. He nodded. Yes, Spider is the only guardian with venom. Then it was time to go. Thanks. He didn't look at me, didn't shift his position once as I left the room. Within minutes, I was dressed in my warm clothes and on Blas's back. Sliding my blades into their sheaths had never felt so good, like I'd reattached a piece of my body that had been missing. Crossbow and whip followed. Just in case. Do we wait for Eric? I struggled with that, and then finally shook my head. No, I don't want him with us. You good with that? Blas let out a long chuckle. Yes, I can look after you. It is my calling after all. His muscles bunched, and in the split second before he launched into the air, a blur of white and gray leapt for his back. Blas let out a snarl, swinging his head around to face the snow leopard now, digging her claws into his back. Peeta, get off my back. You aren't coming. I heard Blas clearly, and obviously he could hear her thoughts. She dug her claws into the leather rigging and flattened herself on his back. I spun in my seat in time to see Eric step into the garden. Blas, go. He didn't argue, just leapt into the air as Eric ran toward us, yelling and hollering. Damn it, Mira. Yeah, I knew he wouldn't be happy. But I was hardly an invalid. Emotionally crippled, yes, I could acknowledge that. But physically, I could take care of myself. And maybe a little mayhem and fighting was what I needed to get through this. Because it was obvious that hiding in a monastery wasn't doing me any good. I waved at him. We won't be long. His waving turned into cursing. And even at the distance we were, I knew what he was saying, could read his lips. Uncle, if I didn't know better, I'd think you were a tracker with that mouth. Blas relayed my words to my uncle, who promptly shut his mouth and folded his arms over his chest. He's worried you're going off to die. Tell him even I'm not that selfish. And tell Ophelia not to help him follow us. Eric didn't shift his position as we flew away, so I had no idea if Blas actually relayed for me. Not that it mattered now. I was doing what I had to do. High above the mountain peak, I sent out a thread, tracking the one guardian who carried venom. Spider was one of the few female guardians, and she nearly killed Doran when we accidentally opened a door into her part of the world. Lucky for us, my blood was enough to bring Doran through. Not so lucky. I didn't think she was going to be happy to see me since I'd cut off one of her legs. Didn't matter that it would grow back, an aspect of being a guardian. And of course, I was banking on the fact she was somewhere in Europe or Asia. If she was across the water, we were in for a long haul. No, I wouldn't think like that. I would find her, and we would make this happen. More than anything, I wanted time with my daughter, as much as I could gain for myself. I would not be the mother who gave up on her child. I gritted my teeth and for the first time put effort into tracking. Instead of letting it just happen, I forced it, flooded it with my intention, gave it my energy. Like a bolt of lightning, it arced out of me and I gasped. Nothing had ever felt like that when I'd tracked before. I kept pushing, kept demanding more, and for a moment I thought I was screwed, my vision blurring with the effort. But then a light ping came back to me, way far away, and I knew without knowing how that Spider was across water. And I just found her. Blas, you feel that? Being as connected as we were, he could sense when I was tracking and when I got a hit on someone. Bonus for me. Yep, heading that way. Wait, how do you do that? I thought you couldn't track across water? Me too. Then what's different this time? I tracked with everything I had. I said, my hands finding Peeta's fur, burying into the thick warmth. This was new, my abilities were still changing and shifting. A blessing or a curse? Which would it turn out to be? For now, it was a blessing I'd take. We had a long flight ahead of us. Spider was on an island in the southern Pacific. I knew that much. I clung to the threads I'd tied to her, afraid if I let go, I wouldn't be able to find her again. High above the earth, the wind was icy against my skin, yet I was running hot, the effort of tracking, forcing myself to keep her tightly to me. Behind me, the snow leopard pressed herself against my back and a curl of energy sank into me. I turned to look at her. What are you? She is an elemental's familiar. From what she's told me, her elemental was taken from her, punished for saving a child that would have otherwise died. That's not right, I said, sliding a hand over Peeta's head. A tear trickled from her green eye and down her thick fur. You miss her. They've been separated for almost 30 years. My heart lurched at the thought of being cut off from Alex for 30 years. Though he was not my familiar, I didn't doubt he was tied to me. And I'd left him behind. I grabbed the ruff around Peeta's neck and buried my face in her fur. I'm sorry for you. And for my stupidity. Mira, you did what you had to do. Alex has a place in this world, and sometimes it is not at your side. Other times it will be glued to your leg. You know that. And before you give voice to it, let me preemptively cut you off. He will forgive you, you have to know that. You have to protect your daughter. And you and I both know Alex blurts things out. What would happen if he blurted out Tian Shan's name? The sanctity of the place would be lost, and all those who have taken sanctuary would be at risk. Liam was right to have you leave Alex behind. I didn't like that Blas was right. Alex, as good as he was for me, would not have been good here. This was not an adventure I could take him on. And Peeta is safe to bring along? She can't talk to you directly without an elemental to make the connection for the two of you, but she is not like Alex. As a familiar, she acts like a conscience and a protector. And she has decided you need her help. A smile flitted across my lips. Thanks, but She butted her head against my cheek and let out a soft purr. I had to admit, it was nice to have a large, warm, furry body with me, even if it wasn't Alex. Upside, no dog farts. Peeta snorted and her lips turned up as she winked at me. Yeah, that was an upside for sure. Try to sleep, Mira. This will be a long trip, and I know where I'm going. If you lose the thread of Spider, it doesn't matter. I have her pinpointed. Peeta curled around me, and I closed my eyes, still clinging to the threads, despite what Blas said. I wasn't sure I could do it again, find Spider across the water. Maybe it was a fluke I'd managed it once. Or maybe it was another sign of my growing abilities. I closed my eyes and drifted off to sleep, my thoughts circling back through my life, which was why I think I ended up reaching out to Birgit. She was my little sister. I hadn't forgotten her, and I knew she was struggling with her own demons as I fought with my grief. The dream took me in an instant, and I knew it for what it was at least. I stood on the docks in Boston, where Birgit and I faced down our mother. Her biological mother, my adoptive mother. where I'd finally shed the last of my guilt over Birgit going missing, where I'd finally gained the closure I needed on my past so I could make the best decisions for my own child. Birgit stood as still as a statue in the middle of the snow-covered dock. The only thing telling me that she lived was the flowing blonde tresses and long skirt blowing around her bare, pale legs. You shouldn't have come here. Stepping toward her, I took my chances. You're my sister. I love you, Birgit. They are so strong in me, Mira. I don't know what is me and what is them anymore. She turned her head to look at me over her shoulder. Tears streaked her cheeks, freezing as they slid down her skin. I don't want to hurt anyone. I never did want to hurt anyone. I then realized I was in a dream, yet it was real at the same time. Across the harbor, the sky glowed softly. The sun was rising, and Birgit stood on the dock, ready to die. Don't do this. I ran to her, grabbing her arms, knowing in the dream I was safe. I crushed her to my chest, holding her tightly. Please, Birgit. I can't take another death. I can't. Liam's gone, and I have nothing. I can't keep losing those I love. My hope is shattered. Her blue eyes were closed as she leaned against me, but she didn't lift her arms to hold me. I know he died. I felt it in the world. There was not a death that could have rocked the veil as his did. He did it to protect you, to protect his child. I held her away from me, my hands on her shoulders. You knew? I wasn't sure, and he asked me not to say anything. And then I didn't have a choice. They have been growing stronger. You know that's why I left, don't you? She opened her eyes, begging me to understand. We could have helped you. Maybe we could have found another opal. I touched the spot in her chest where we'd buried the precious stone that kept the two ancient vampires she carried within her at bay. But even that hadn't been enough. She covered my hand with one of hers. No, there is nothing left. I was given a brief moment that was my own, to see you, to love my family for a short time. But that was all. I could do nothing now but try to keep them from doing more damage with my body to the world. To you. Behind me, I felt the sun rising and panic nipped at me. Another day or two, you can at least do that much, can't you? Birgit, the last battle is coming, the final reckoning. I need you there at my side, fighting with me against Orion. She pried my hands from her and gently pushed me away. And if I turn on you in the last moments? If they decide that Orion should have you? What then? Birgit shook her head. She had made her decision, but I wouldn't let her go without a fight. I need your help, Birgit. Please. I need the blood of a vampire, someone I can trust. I stood between her and the rising sun, my shadow the only thing keeping her shaded. Birgit, help me. Her head lowered and her shoulders shook. It's so hard to fight them, every day, every second. They batter at me now. There is no rest, no respite. I shook her, hard enough to snap her head back. Listen to me. We all have to fight. You aren't any different than the rest of us. This is the price we pay for being who we are. Her eyes blazed, and I put my nose to hers. And you two asshats who are doing this to her, you realize you're pushing her to the brink? If she dies, you die, dumb fucks. Blue eyes faded to a deep brown, and she blinked up at me. You don't think she will really end her life, do you? She is our child. We love her. I found it interesting they would ask me, as if I knew my sister better than they did, which of course was the case. Well, you've got a fucking stupid way of showing it. I tightened my grip on her arms, squeezing until I could feel the tendons sliding under my fingers. If you love her, let her be. Let her use what you know to live. Fade in her. Let her live her life. Because you are going to kill all three of you if you keep this up. Even now it may be too late. The brown eyes fluttered closed, and when they opened again, they were blue. Startled and wide, blue like a summer sky. What did you say to them? Birgit whispered, leaning into me. Why? I held her gently now, no longer gripping her tightly. They've gone quiet. For the first time since we put the opal in. She tipped her head up so she could look me in the face. How long do you think they'll give me? She was so damn young despite the knowledge she held. I think maybe they're going to give you as much as you want. I stroked her hair and kissed her on the forehead. I pulled back from her, feeling the tug of spiders' threads on me in the waking world. I have to go. The others, they're still in England. You should go there. If anywhere is safe, it will be with them. They will think I'm there to kill them. Even Doran? My mention of the vampire ruler brought a flush to her pale cheeks. So, she still had a crush on him. There were far worse she could moon after. I don't know. Try. Birgit, try. For me. Please. Around us, the dream was fading and the sun was nearly above the horizon. Birgit saw it, turned and ran from the dock, her final words singing across the water me. If you need vampire blood, take it from Ferris. He is close by. He will help you. Ferris. I gasped his name. You're shitting me. She looked over her shoulder, and something in her eyes, a certainty that she was right, filled them. Damn. Chapter 6. I startled awake. PETA lying across my lap, and Blaz's wings a steady beat in my ears. The air was heavy with salt, and I realized how very warm I was, sweating through my layers of clothes. Spider's thread pulsed with a life of its own under my skin, calling to me. She was relaxed, just waking and very hungry, which made her happy. Weird. But then, she was a spider after all. Who the hell knew why she felt happy when she was hungry? We're close. Yes, I'm dropping right now. And if I were to guess, she's happy because she's about to drain the life out of something in order to sate her hunger. That was what I'd been thinking too. She was not a nice guardian. Not at all. Blaz tucked his wings and dove straight through several banks of clouds, the moisture slapping me in the face, and I struggled to keep my eyes open. The sound of a jet engine brought my head around. We passed a plane, a flash of silver, a few faces peeking out of tiny square windows, and then it was gone. But not before I saw a single child pointing at us, his mouth a perfect O. I smiled to myself. Everyone would chalk up what he saw to his imagination. Moments later, ears popping, Blaz landed on an open, sandy beach. His body sunk into the soft sand with a thud. Oh, take as long as you like here. He stretched out on the hot sand and let out a long groan. This is bloody lovely. I slid off his back and landed lightly. PETA leapt off and trotted in front of me, her heavy coat looking out of place in the tropical climate. As I watched her, she shook and her coat slicked back, going from a winter coat to a thin summer version of Spot's. Nice trick, cat. She gave a grunt and tipped her head toward the heavy jungle in front of us. Yeah, that's where I was going. Blaz, you coming? Please, Mom, just 5 more minutes. His eyes were at half-mast as he rolled in the sand. Come on, PETA. He'll catch up. I shed my heavy layers until I was wearing nothing but jeans, a white tank top, and boots. Reattaching my back sheaths, I tightened the straps. Damn, the belly strap wasn't fitting the same as it had even a week past. Too tight now. Ignoring the groans of my dragon, I headed into the thick jungle, PETA on my left side and a blade in my right hand. I slashed through the undergrowth, following the thread I'd attached to Spider. She was about 2 miles ahead of us, which under normal circumstances wasn't a big deal, but in the heavy jungle was a serious pain in the ass. PETA clawed at one of the larger trees, digging deep into the bark, then getting the grip she was apparently looking for, powered herself up the tree. Tucking my blade into its sheath, I climbed the trunk, using the notches her claws dug out to stand beside her. Son of a bitch. The trees weaved themselves into a roadway that covered the entire island. The branches overlapped, touching here and there, but making a perfect pathway for us. PETA grunted and started forward. Wait, is this something to do with your elemental? Blaz filled in for me. Her elemental taught her tricks she wasn't supposed to. How to call on the plants and earth to do her bidding. She bobbed her head and kept moving. I pulled a blade again and started after her. I was going to have to make a serious effort to meet this elemental of PETA's. Under my feet, the trees shuddered and shifted. I looked down to see how far up we were. At least 30 feet. Crap. Falling was not a good idea at any time, and I'd survive it if happened, but I wasn't sure what would happen to the baby. Fuck. Sweat popped out along the edge of my hairline. Mira, you got a plan? Blaz called to me from the beach, his words still easily heard despite the distance. I'm going to get her attention and try to draw her to you, I said, the plan forming on the spot. And then? I shrugged. We try to get some venom from her while you hold her still. Sound good? What are you going to put the venom in, exactly? Damn. Why are you such a plan pooper? I pulled a silver flask out from my back pocket that I'd pinched from the monastery. Now who's the planning queen, eh? Peta, ahead of me and obviously listening in on the conversation, snickered. I smiled. A flask should work just fine now? I could almost feel Blas shrug, but he didn't argue. The closer we got to the center of the island, the closer I could feel Spider, and the more I wasn't so sure my plan was going to work. The trees still held together for us, but attached to them were spider webs the size of a California king mattress, and most of them held still squirming animals in them. Monkeys, but a few other creatures as well, like the hog that was hung upside down. I froze. Strike that, human, not hog. I swallowed hard. Spider was not one I would want to tangle with on a good day, no matter how desperate I was. I licked my lips. Itsy bitsy spider went up the water spout. Ahead of us, something big and black shifted in the treetops. Tracker. Oh shit. We stopped where we were. Spider, nice to see you. I need some of your venom. Belatedly, I added, please. She scuttled down the branches, the sound of her hairy legs rustling against the leaves like a subtle whisper of dried branches brushing against a window on a deep winter's night. She leaned toward us, her large golden orbs staring, unblinking. Creepy, creepy, creepy. I did not like this. I put my sword away as a sign of good faith, hoping I was making a good decision. Peta moved, so she stood in front of me, the fur over her body puffing up and a low growl trickling past her lips. Spider, did you hear me? A little of your venom and we'll fuck off. And if I don't give you my venom, what then? Do you think to kill me like you did the wolf? I bit down on the angry retort that swelled my throat and settled for shaking my head. I'm hoping you'll help without the use of force. And I didn't kill him. He made his choice. She laughed, a high-pitched tinkling laugh that made me think of a petite woman as she entertained a man she was trying to catch. Oh fuck. I stepped back, Peta with me. Time to go. I spun, a blur of black legs flashing behind us. I didn't stop to watch, to see how fast she was. I bolted back the way we'd come, Peta right behind me. The little bit of treetops still above us danced over our heads, and it was then I realized the stupidity of my plan. Spider was outflanking us, using the treetops to travel, and as the thought entered my head, she dropped out of the trees in front of us. I didn't think, just spun and leapt for the branches across the way. No point in trying to be careful. If I didn't make it out of this alive, it wouldn't matter to the child I carried anyway. The branches slid through my hand as I fell, digging into the flesh, tearing at my skin and stripping it from my hands. But I slowed and only hit the ground with a mild thump. Spider let out a laugh. Little pig, you'll be a fine meal indeed. Shit. Peta landed beside me, a muffled growl as she pawed at her face. I dropped to a knee to see her lips coated with spider web, sealing her mouth shut. I ripped it off, taking fur with it, but she didn't complain. We've got to run. You think you can help open the way with your elemental mojo? She bobbed her head once and then took off. Above us, Spider laughed again, and I didn't wait to see if she was climbing down. Peta ran ahead of me, dodging and leaping through the jungle, the branches pulling back just long enough to allow us to shoot through. A branch let loose too soon and swatted me in the face, knocking me flat on my back. Fuck! I rolled to the side and got to my feet. Ahead of me, the path had closed off around Peta, and behind me came the skittering of 8 legs scrambling along the branches. What's the matter, little tracker? You didn't really think you could outrun me, did you? I was hoping. I spun slowly, doing my best to keep my eyes on all the parts of the jungle at once. Not an easy thing. Need my help yet? Blas, it's about fucking time. Track her, so I can pinpoint where she is. I sent a thread out, tapping into Spider. I stilled. She was directly above me, but I knew the only reason she hadn't dropped on me was the simple fact she was curious. That came through the threads loud and clear. Spider, why do the other guardians not like you? I turned, carefully, acting as if the jungle was what I searched. That isn't why you're here. Her voice came from my left, and I twisted, knowing she wasn't there. The big bitch could throw her voice, apparently. No, it's not. But I don't think you're going to willingly help me, are you? The sound of a body thumping down directly behind me brought me around, blade raised. I hadn't expected to see a woman standing there. She was taller than me, her body angular and bony under the long sheer black see-through lace dress she wore. Her skin was a burnished gold under the shift, almost matching her eyes. I lowered my blade. "Spider." She nodded once. "I don't have to be a mind reader to know your dragon was going to scoop me up if I stayed in my other form. That doesn't mean I can't kill you like this." She grinned and fangs lowered in her mouth to drip venom onto her chest. I braced myself as she pulled a blade from her back. It has been a long time since I had a taste of combat like this. She held up her sword so it caught the light. "I'm looking forward to this." Without pausing, she swept the blade toward me, and I caught it with my own, sliding the tip down the length of her blade to her hand, cutting into the flesh. Snarling, she twisted her sword, blocking me and then pushing me back. "Clever girl. Tell me what would make you risk your life to find me?" "You had to know I wouldn't welcome a visit from the one who cut a leg off me." Our blades met again, the fine steel clashing as we tested each other's strengths. "I need a few drops of your venom." "So you said." She spun and drove the tip of her blade toward my middle. I sidestepped and came slam my own blade hard on the flat of her sword, forcing it down far enough that I could get a boot on the flat of the blade and slam it to the ground. She surprised me, going with it so that she didn't lose her grip and was able to jerk the sword out from under me. But there are only a few things my venom is good for besides killing. I really did not want to tell her the reason, and I hoped to hell she wouldn't be able to guess. But by the way her eyes suddenly widened and how she relaxed her fighting stance, I had a sinking feeling she'd figured it out. "The wolf knocked you up?" Her mouth dropped open. "He left you with child? And without protection?" I lowered my blade and tightened my lips. "You giving me your venom or not?" She grinned. I think I will." Finally, something was going right. She shifted back into her full spider form, 8 legs splayed out in the tight space we'd been fighting in, golden orbs unblinking. "Give my regards to the wolf." "Oh, fucking hell." She lunged at me, mouth open wide, and I dove to the right, just managing to avoid her fangs. "Run, little girl. Run so your blood is hot and sweet when I take it from you." She screeched behind me, and as much as I didn't want to do what she wanted, standing still would do me no fucking good. I hung on her threads, keeping a bead on her both for me and Blas. Above us, he let out a roar, and the trees sagged under his weight. Branches fell around me, several clattering at my feet. "A little close, lizard. I can't get to you. You have to lead her to the beach." There was no way Spider was going to come into the open, unless I could piss her off enough that rage would blind her. "Spider, you fucking douche. I'm going to find a can of bug spray and shove it up your ass while you sleep." I fought with the branches, and then they slid away from me. PETA was beside me once more, her eyes filled with worry. I put a hand on her back, and we ran through the jungle, leaping down logs as the skittering of an oversized arachnid behind us and an enraged dragon above us filled the air. "Blas, back off!" I yelled, hearing the ocean and the wash of waves on the sand. "I want to face her on my own." "You will do no such thing, you idiot." It was a struggle for me to talk mind to mind with him, but I forced it. "Just go high enough that she can't see you. Drop when you can." I tried to show him with pictures what I wanted him to do, and he gave me a mental nod. "Be careful, Mira. She isn't like the other Guardians." I didn't for one second think she was like the other Guardians. Even they had said she was a bitch, and some of them had been possessed by demons. We burst onto the white sand, the bright light reflecting off the water a stark contrast to the dim shadows of the jungle. I spun and fell on my ass, scooting back as fast as I could. Even so, Spider didn't hesitate. "Oh, poor little tracker. No guardian to keep you safe, and already you're going to die. Bite me, bitch." I screamed at her, letting my anger stay on the surface, letting her see that and not the pain of her mentioning Liam. "I'm not so stupid as you, tracker. I won't be letting your dragon get his claws on me." The sound of something wet sluicing through the air was the only warning I had. PETA, though, apparently had more sense. She grabbed the back of my shirt, jerking me out of the way as a white web landed in the sand where I'd been just a moment before. I pushed myself to my feet. "Thanks." We backed away from the jungle, and I pulled my crossbow from the sand where I'd left it. Sighting down it, I aimed for the glowing eye I could see still. Spider didn't seem worried. Too cocky, just like before, and that was about to cost her. I breathed out and squeezed the trigger. The golden ore burst as the bolt buried deep into it. Spider flailed back, screaming. A flock of birds flew into the air from the jungle as she screeched, her pain like fingernails on a chalkboard. I grabbed the flask and ran toward her. Blaz, hurry! Sure, as soon as I get far enough away that I can't hurry. You call for me? I hate your plans, Mira. Peta was at my side, and she let out a noise that could only be a whimper of fear. Yeah, I wasn't too keen on this idea either, but like all plans, this one had to change on the fly. Spider rolled onto her back, all 8 legs spazzing, knocking into trees and sending small animals scurrying. I loaded my crossbow and took aim on her other eye. Breathing out, I squeezed the trigger and the bolt flew true a second time. Behind me, Blaz thumped onto the sand, the reverberation sliding up my legs. Grab her. Thought she outsmarted us. I didn't say anything because the truth was, it was a fucking fluke we were able to get this far without getting our asses handed to us. Or at least my ass handed to me, Blaz would be fine regardless. Blaz reached into the shelter of the jungle and grabbed a single back leg, then dragged Spider into the sun. She flailed and spun, but without her eyes, she couldn't get close enough to drive her fangs home. With a rumbling laugh, Blaz pinned her onto her back, her fangs easily accessible. Swallowing hard, I strode forward, silver flask in hand. Spider flung her head back and forth, her ruined eyes leaking blood and a clear fluid. A gag rocked me, and I had to stop to gather myself. You're getting sensitive to gore. You can thank Liam for that. Gritting my teeth, I pulled my shit together. Yeah, I figured that out. Spider turned her head toward my voice. You bitch, I'll kill you for this. I don't care if you are to save the world from the demons. I will kill you. Get in line. I approached her carefully and grabbed some of the wiry hairs sticking out of the top of her head. They vibrated under my fingers as I yanked her head back, forcing her fangs to expose and pull them away from the little grabbers around them. Grabbers? I don't know what the fuck these things are called. I pointed at the thick feelers near her mouth. Blaz laughed, Peta snorted, and Spider tried to grab me with one of said grabbers. I jammed the silver flask onto the end of the fong closest to me. The steady drip of fluid hitting the bottom of the empty flask eased some of the fear in me. Not much, but a little. When it was halfway full, I pulled it off her fong and capped it. Thanks. You go on now. Be a good little spider. Blaz grunted. Perhaps you should get on my back before I let her go. I hadn't planned on racing her around the beach to see who was faster. I glared at the dragon, who shrugged. I never know with you. Peta went ahead of me, leaping onto Blaz's back, and I climbed up behind her. Looking down on the black, writhing legs, the idea of her coming after me and finding my daughter did something to me that I'd never experienced before. A cold anger started in my gut and spread outward, a knowledge that I would do anything to keep my kids safe. All those years of rescuing other people's children, and the anger I'd felt on their part, was nothing to the ice forming in me now. Spider, do not make the mistake of coming after me. Be glad I only took your eyes, seeing as we both know they will heal. They won't, you bitch, Spider snarled and scrambled away from Blaz as he let her go. They won't heal. A sob ripped out of her, and I wondered if she was just making it up, baiting us. Blaz. I gripped the leather strapping in front of me. We're gone. He pushed off the sand, wings coming down in a swoop that sent up a mini dust storm. Spider didn't turn around, just scuttled back into the jungle, knocking into trees, bouncing off the trunks. Maybe she wouldn't heal. I looked deep inside me and realized I didn't feel bad. Not one tiny bit of guilt ate at me. There was too much at stake, and she hadn't cooperated. Peta sat behind me and dropped a paw on one shoulder. I turned to face her. She had a worried look in her eye. I'm fine. She shook her head and tipped her chin up, motioning back towards Spider. No, I don't feel bad and don't intend to. Okay, maybe I did feel bad, but what the hell was I supposed to do about it now? That worried look didn't leave Peta's eyes. Instead, it seemed to grow. I refused to feel bad. Spider was damn hard to kill, and maybe she wouldn't be so inclined to jab her fangs into people now that she couldn't see. Where to? We need a vampire. Blaz's voice was soft, as though he were not really listening for my answer. What is Peeta worried about? That you're going to get too cold. That you will lose the part of you that makes up the best parts of you. I sagged a little. That won't happen. I can't keep losing pieces of my heart and not have it suffer. Spider threatened not only me, but my baby. The word stuck in my throat a little, and I stumbled over it. Peeta's eyes softened, and she nodded, accepting my explanation. Why the hell I needed to explain myself to a cat? That was a new one on me. Find a place we can land, somewhere away from everything. We'll wait for night, and I'll call Ferris. You're kidding me, right? Why in the seven hells would you call on Ferris of all the vampires you could choose from? I closed my eyes and let him see the conversation I'd had with Birgit, where I'd stopped her from killing herself, and she'd said to get Ferris to help me with the whole blood business. I sent out a thread, tracking the vampire. Shock rippled through me as I realized how close he was. Birgit had been right. Go. He's close and he'll help us. And if he refuses? I gave a smile I didn't truly feel. Well, why do you think I brought you two along? We'll make him. One way or another. Ferris will bleed for me. Chapter 7. With a grunt, Blaz banked to the right, taking us farther over the ocean. Through the tracking threads I held, Blaz would find Ferris and I could rest. I closed my eyes and leaned against Peeta, who started to purr. The soft rumble and the warmth of her fur, thick and wintry, once more relaxed me. The silver flask was cool against my skin, and I clung to it. One more ingredient, and then we were off to the fucking races. Reality was setting in. Whether I was ready or not, I was going to be a mother. And if this one is planned, it would be very soon. I bit back a whimper that bubbled up my chest. Nope, not letting that happen. I was done crying. No more looking back. It was no longer a matter of having time or not for grief. It was the numbing the emotion had on me. I couldn't function, and that was not the place I needed to be. The world, my child, my loved ones. They needed me at my best, sharpest, most decisive. I couldn't be that if I was mired in my sorrow and loss. That revelation freed something in me, a weight I'd been carrying since Giselle died months ago. Losing those I loved, those I thought I couldn't live without, had shown me something. I was a hell of a lot stronger than I realized, emotionally more than physically. When I trained with Giselle, my physicality had served me well, but so often my temper got the better of me. Or the pain of the past and the shame that went with it derailed what I could do. I carried it all for so long, I almost didn't know how to function without it. Yet, that tiny flicker of a flame inside me that burned away the past showed me I could do more than I knew. That I could survive without my loved ones, no matter the pain. And survive I would. My stomach growled, yanking me out of my thoughts. I need to eat. Blaz didn't answer, just tucked his wings in tight to his body and dove. Peeta snarled, and Blaz let out an answering snarl. I glanced back to see Peeta clinging to Blaz, her claws digging into his scales, her fur standing as the wind rushed around us. She looked like a cartoon cat, and a pissed-off one at that. A laugh escaped me, and she glared my way, though there was a distinctive twinkle in the green depths. Blaz was not laughing. Peeta, not so much Claw. I don't think she can let go, I said, laughing between the words, the wind sweeping it all away. Blaz seemed to think I was encouraging him. He spiraled as he dove, and Peeta let out a roar, her muscles bunching as she dug in deep to hang on. Her face was fucking priceless. Her eyes squinted shut, and her fur spun out in every direction. Her lips jiggled around her bared fangs, and I couldn't stop laughing. I knew Blaz would catch her if she came off, but it was like watching someone on a roller coaster, and they didn't realize it was safe, no matter how scary a ride it was. 10 seconds of the crazy, spinning ride, and I'd had enough, my innards feeling as if they were climbing up my throat. Blaz, stop! I slapped a hand over my mouth as he leveled out, then landed. I slid from his back, fell to my knees, and heaved until the dry heaves brought sweat to my face and tears to my eyes. I wiped the back of my hand across my mouth. Damn. Peeta says that's what you get for laughing at her freaking out. I couldn't even lift my head, but I managed to give her a thumbs up. Got it. Where are we? Doesn't matter, and better you don't know, I think. Call Ferris when it's dark. He's tied to Alex, not me. Blas grunted and dug a claw through the rocky ground. Don't be so sure about that. I think he's tied himself to you somehow. Maybe even through Alex. Finally, I raised my head. Through Alex or through Birgit? A memory surfaced of Ferris and me standing in the basement apartment I'd had while I was in London. Of his mouth on my neck. Of the flood of lust he'd spurred in me as he'd taken my blood. Damn, could he still be hooked into me from that? It would be like him to hide the fact he could still find me. Secrets. That one was all about the secrets, bastard that he was. I shook my head to clear the thoughts and let out a groan. Even that simple motion made my stomach roll. Laying down, I curled up on my side, waves of nausea cascading through me. I closed my eyes. How long till dark? An hour. Saliva filled my mouth as I sat up, and I forced myself to swallow. Pushing to my feet, I looked around. Blas had brought us to another jungle island, though this one had a rockier beach. I realized we were missing something. Where's Peta? Hunting. She's going to bring something back for you to eat. I gathered up some sticks and piled them up on the beach. Blas lit them. And within minutes Peta was back, some sort of bird in her mouth. Blood dripped along its feathers. And I had a sudden flash of fear that I would be throwing up instead of eating. But my stomach growled again, and my hunger spiked. Definitely Liam's kid, if the sight of a dead bird makes you hungry and not queasy. Blas picked up the bird by one leg and blew a stream of flame over it, searing off the feathers in short order, then lowered it over the fire we'd put together on the beach. The sound and smell of sizzling fat had me drooling in minutes, and all I could think about was tearing into the flesh, biting off huge chunks. A half hour passed, and I couldn't wait any longer. Give it to me. I wiggled my hands as Blas snorted. It isn't cooked all the way through yet. I don't think. I snatched the bird off the stick we'd jammed it on and ripped a leg off. I bit into the flesh and let out a groan as the juices slid down my throat. No, it wasn't cooked all the way through, but then again, I was carrying a wolf hybrid child. I didn't think a little blood was going to bother the baby. As if in answer, the baby gave a kick. I didn't slow down, just tucked into the bird and found myself licking my fingers far sooner than I'd thought. Thanks, both of you. I looked up to see Blas with his thickly ridged eyebrows high. I turned to Peta, who had a similar expression on her face. Half horror, half fascination, all surprise. What? I've never seen anyone clean off a whole chicken in under 5 minutes. I frowned up at him. I didn't eat that fast. You did. But I suppose you haven't been eating much, and the baby is going to start demanding you chow down. Especially once you manage to speed things up. I looked up at the sky, thinking. True, but that won't matter if we don't get some vampire blood. I stood, went to the water's edge, and washed my face and hands. The salt water stung my hands, and I turned them over to see some small cuts. I'd not noticed them when I'd been fighting Spider, but 2 of them were quite deep. I pinched the one closed and hissed at the sharp pain. Damn, Ferris. I said his name and imbued it with the need I had for him. A true need, not just a simple want. I tracked him too, and felt him moving toward us fast. Peta let out a growl, and I turned to see Ferris walking across the beach to me. The sun had just set, and the last of the light kept the sky glowing, highlighting his figure. Blonde-haired and blue-eyed, he cut a striking image, his body lean and muscles cut as if defined by a sculptor. Dressed in khakis and a white shirt, he was very bohemian-looking, an unusual outfit and style for him. And then there was the missing arm. He moved as if it didn't bother him, though I had no doubt it did. The loss of it made him look weak and vulnerable, not something any vampire could afford. Mira, I'm surprised you would call on me. His voice was as smooth and cool as expensive ice cream, and I knew he was trying to spell me. Still? What the fuck, man? You'd think you'd figure it out after all this time. I don't do the whole spelling shit. I put my hands on my hips to emphasize my position. That I was in charge and wasn't going to put up with his games. He smiled at me, a small smile that allowed his fangs to peek out. You can't blame me for trying. Why? Because you left me to die the last time I saw you. That was the other reason I was surprised he came to see me so easily. He had to know I was still pissed about that. He'd closed the veil between me, Eric, Pam, and Alex and the safety of London, just to keep Doran safe. Now, even if I understood that part of his decision, he could have at least tried to get us to somewhere else. He shrugged. I'm a realist. So are you. That's why we work so well together. Fuck, I hated that he was right about that. I grimaced. Look, I need your help. He spread his one hand. Depends. I need some of your blood. His eyebrows shot up. You what? I repeated myself, and he slowly shook his head. No, I don't do that. Why the fuck not? He frowned, his face closing off, giving me no emotion. I don't share my blood with anyone. It isn't just you. There is too much power in a vampire's blood to just hand it out. I'm hardly a blood horse standing on a corner and begging you to give me a fix. I snapped, closing the distance between us, knowing what he was pushing for. What do you want? His face went from frowning to smiling in an instant, and he lifted his hand to touch my cheek. Well, if you really want the blood that badly, I suppose I would consider it. If you give me what I want, that is. The chicken in my belly flip-flopped, and I fought to keep it down. You'd ask that of me, when Liam has been gone for barely a few days? His eyes slid to half-mast. Where did your wolf go? I'm surprised he would leave you at this stage of your life. Oh fuck, he didn't know. But damn it, had everyone but me known I was pregnant? You haven't spoken with Doran? He shook his head, stroking my cheek with a single finger. No, he's rather irritated with me for leaving you behind. And he thought you might try and kill me if I was close by. So, I've been spending my time waiting for the call to go back to my liege. Not that I could anyway, there is something wrong with the veil. To be fair, I thought I'd find Doran here with you when you called for me. I licked my lips and struggled to find the words. Nothing would shock Ferris. He wouldn't feel bad that Liam had died, or how. I slumped and turned my back. The last thing I needed to see was the vampire smile when I told him. I needed his help, and his reaction to my words could get him killed in short order. Liam's dead. Silence met my words, and slowly, I turned back to him. He wasn't gloating. He wasn't smiling. His mouth hung open in the most unvampire-like manner as the shock hit him. How? I told him briefly about the veil being closed off, which made me question something rather pertinent. How the hell did you get to us with the veil closed? I think your dragon knows more than he lets on. Come, I'll show you. With Ferris leading the way, PETA and I walked down the beach. Blas chose to stay behind. He won't harm you, that much I can see inside his head. Convince him to help you, Mira. Blas curled up on the beach and tucked his head inside the curve of his tail. It hit me then that I wasn't the only one who'd been run ragged the last few months. We all had been pushed to the brink, pushed to limits we didn't know we had. Rounding a slight point in the beach, I stopped, shock rippling through me. The house was made of white sandstone and stood high enough that the waves didn't hit it. But it wasn't the beauty of the house, or the place it stood. No, it was that I'd been here before. This was Millie's refuge, a place she hid to lick her wounds. You were already here? I haven't been able to jump the veil for the last few days. I thought perhaps I'd lost the ability, or that the demons had shut things down. Ferris said, his eyes never leaving mine. If Blas hadn't brought you here, I wouldn't have been able to find you. I tracked you here. Ferris frowned. How? I'm in the middle of the ocean. That's why Millie picked this place, you know? You couldn't track her here. Things change. I put a hand on PETA to help steady me. Not because I was really all that faint, I just needed the comfort of her. If I couldn't have Alex with me, PETA was a damn fine substitute. Even if she wasn't much of a talker, she still made me smile. My lips twitched as I saw her once more clinging to Blas's back, her hair all floating upward as we pitched out of the sky. She batted at my leg as if she knew where my mind went. Sorry. Ferris lifted an eyebrow. Talking to a cat? No worse than talking to a bloodsucker. I spit out. No need to get testy, he said, then waved us toward the house with his hand. Welcome to Chateau Alam Millicent. The place was as I remembered, covered in flowers, smelling of sweet growing things, a warm breeze sweeping around us. The white sandstone building was 3 stories, but really, none of that mattered. Ferris, I need your blood. I stood in the middle of the raised patio that faced the ocean. And either you can give it to me, or I'll take it. Your decision. He lifted one eyebrow. This again? Can't we all just get along? I didn't move, just waited. You can't jump the veil to get away, and I have a fucking dragon in my back pocket. You think you can outmaneuver him? Ferris slid into a wicker chair, placing his hand over his chest. You wound me, Mira. You won't even tell me why you need my blood? Just demand it. Threaten me, and you'll somehow get your way? After all that I've done to help you. Can the shit, Ferris. You've caused me as much trouble as you've supposedly helped, so I think we're on neutral ground here. I pulled a chair toward me with my foot and sat, Peta sitting beside me. I stroked the fur on the top of her head, scratching lightly behind her ears. If I tell you what it's for, you'll willingly help. His mouth twitched, and I wanted to strangle him. What are you doing out anyway? I heard you were supposedly off to some sanctuary to keep you and the Rugrats safe. Fucking asshole. That is none of your fucking business. He leaned forward. Oh, I think it is. You are the only thing standing between us and the demons now, Tracker. And you're gallivanting around? Not acceptable. His hand tightened over my wrist, and I fought not to jerk away from him. I would not be afraid of him. He wouldn't hurt me for the very reasons he just stated. Then again, he was a vampire, and he'd been after my blood for a long time. His grip tightened further to the point of pain. Let me go, I said, fighting not to struggle against him. I'd look ridiculous fighting with a one-armed vampire and losing, because even if I was willing to kill him, and there had been days I'd been close to that, I wasn't stronger than him. Not even with him missing an arm. Slowly, inexorably, he pulled me toward him. I put my free hand against his chest. Don't, Ferris. Don't make this a show of power and strength. Or what? I have a dragon. In the distance, Blas gave a roar, his voice coming to me, clear as a bell. Mira, run. It's a trap. Oh, fuck me. I jerked my arm, but nothing happened except the loosening of my arm and my shoulder socket. Ferris, let me go. Peta let out a snarl, crouched beside me, her body language a clear warning. Ferris ignored her. You need to be kept safe, one way or another. And if you aren't smart enough to do it, then I will do it for you. What the hell did he think? You're fucking kidding me, right? Ferris, you think you're looking out for me? The demons took your arm. You aren't going to be able to take care of me any better. He yanked me around so we were nose to nose, his lips actually brushing mine as he spoke. It's because they took my arm that I know how much trouble you're in being out here on your own. You took an old man, a half-broken guardian, and a dragon with you. A dragon who is being attacked right now. Horror and anger flooded me. I scrambled to feel Blas, but got nothing. Peta, can you sense Blas? She shook her head, eyes drawn. What did you do to him? I screamed, reaching for my blade. It's not me, Mira. There are still demons on this side of the veil, you little idiot. You think you killed them all in the fire at the castle? There is a fucking plague sweeping the world, and you're pregnant. The last hope for our world, and you act like you can just do anything you please. He was yelling at me, his eyes blue with fire in the shadows. If you can't see that you need to keep yourself safe until this kid shows up, then you need someone to do it for you. His words were like a splash of cold water, as much what he said as how he said it. Ferris didn't have a potty mouth, and it shocked me to hear him actually cuss. I stopped squirming. Ferris, I have a place that is safe, but only if Blas is still okay. He can get me back there. Again, I struggled to sense my friend, but got nothing back. Tracking him was easy, and I could sense he was alive and well, but unconscious. What's happening to him? The vampire shook his head, blonde hair catching the firelight. Most likely just stunned. The demons around here are fairly minor, but there are a lot of them. Like a gang of pygmies, they have some venom that can drop even a large creature like a dragon. They'll be headed here next. I didn't protest as he half-dragged, half-led me through the house, Starlight the only guide we had. Blas would be okay. I had to believe that. What are their weaknesses? They don't like sunlight. I snorted a laugh. So like your very own mini-me's? Not funny. There's enough of them that unless we can hold out until the morning, it won't matter that the plague is sweeping the world, or that there are only 6 months of respite from the veil being closed off. That is, if you were right about Liam's sacrifice. We reached the lowest level, and I noticed that while it was below the ground, it was only sunk about halfway, and there were narrow windows along the hallway we strode down. The light will come through the windows, and we just have to wait them out. You think the 3 of us can't take them? I was surprised he wanted to hide. Really surprised. Ferris opened a heavy door that looked to be oak bound together with iron bands. "There are too many, Mira," he said, reading my surprise. He pointed to the windows, and the flash of legs that went by brought me to a standstill. I did a quick count as they raced by and felt the sweat chill along my spine. At least 100. And that isn't all of them. There are probably 4 times that. 400 mini demons. Yeah, even I knew I couldn't take on that many. Fucking hell, I did not want to be stuck in a room with Ferris for what I knew was going to be at least 10 hours. Behind us, the sound of squealing filled the air, like a herd of cannibalistic pigs. Ferris grabbed me and jerked me into the room. Peter leaped through just before he slammed the door. But I could see, as the door shut, the first wave of demons. The pig analogy wasn't so far off. They were about 4 feet high, cloven hooves, pale pink skin, and their faces resembled a mutated pig with oversized tusks and tiny black eyes. The squealing rose to a fever pitch as they caught sight of me. And then I was helping Ferris slam the door shut. 3 bars of iron slammed into place over the door as the pygmies hit it. The frame didn't even rattle. I stepped back, the breath whooshing out of me. The room we'd locked ourselves. I shivered. I knew it for what it was. A spelling room. This was where Millie would have gone to make spells to try new things. There was a pentagram burned into the white stone floor. Shelving filled the walls with books and bottles. Yes, this is where she spoke with him. I swallowed hard, thinking of Millie calling on Orion. She was trapped. I know that now. Ferris sucked in a breath, and I let out a little laugh. You're surprised I would say that? I know how much you hated her for betraying you. And do not forget, I have been on the receiving end of your anger too. He slumped into a chair and pointed to another beside him. I took the chair as the chattering of the demons outside the door hummed through. Yes, I hated her, but I love her too. She was my best friend. My only friend for a lot of years. We didn't always see eye to eye, but I understand her better now than I ever did. His blue eyes met mine, and there was a softness I'd never seen. I stared back. You didn't care for her. He shook his head, but his gaze didn't waver. No, I didn't. She wasn't the one who intrigued me. I raised my eyebrows and looked away, unwilling to go there. I wish I'd had more time with her. I wish. So many things. His chair creaked, and he stretched out his legs, just into the edge of my vision. Well, is there anything you'd like to say to me? Because we're stuck in here till dawn, and then you will get back on your dragon and go back to your sanctuary, and you will stay there. That was the plan all along, vampire. He grunted. Time to let it all hang out then, isn't it? I stretched out beside him. And what would you like to talk about? Exactly. Where do we stand? You and I. Shit, that was not what I expected. And now I was stuck in a tiny room with him. And I would be forced to have a heart-to-heart with a vampire who, at turns, had tried to kill me and fuck me, depending on his mood and designs of the day. This was about to get interesting, to say the least. Chapter 8. I spread my hands. I'm here. What the hell do you want to discuss? Exactly. Where will you go after it's done? After Orion is defeated and the world is safe? You can't go back to your life in Bismarck. He said it with such surety. I wondered how he knew. I don't know. I have to stop Orion first. I have to have a baby and make sure she's safe. I have a whole damn book of prophecy to read and memorize, so I can do that first thing. I shrugged and then rubbed a hand over my bare arm. Day by day, step by step. I can't do more than that. Surprisingly wise for a tracker, that is, Ferris said. I twisted in my seat to glare at him. What the hell's that supposed to mean? He smiled at me, and I thought he was actually giving me a true smile, maybe for the first time in the months I'd known him. His mouth relaxed, and there was no effort to charm me. You're growing up, Mira. When I first met you, impetuous wouldn't come close to how you were. You left as you saw fit, without looking, without thinking. And it was sheer luck most times that you didn't get killed. Your instincts and heart led you true, but the game that's afoot now, it needs more than heart and instinct. It needs a hero who thinks, who sees what's coming and makes changes to her own actions so the best possible outcome can happen. He rubbed the stump of his arm. I should know, I didn't think when I went into the castle. It's been so long since anyone has truly presented me with danger that I never even paused to consider what could happen. But you didn't know what was going to be there, none of us did. I pointed out. He snorted. I knew it would be a situation. The castle was no longer a place of safe passage, yet I walked in as if I owned it. And I paid the price. We were quiet for a minute. Peta laid her head on my lap, and I put a hand on her, once more grateful for her presence. I looked at Ferris massaging what was left of his arm. Does it hurt? He stopped rubbing the stump. No, not like you mean. Then how? It hurt my ego more than anything, he said ruefully. Maybe I needed to be humble. I burst out laughing. Maybe. He gave me a smile, a twist of his lips. I've lived a long time. It's hard to be humble when you've defied the odds. I tipped my head to one side. What odds? He blew out a breath. Well, it's not like I don't have the time to tell you. Would you like to hear the story of how I came to be a vampire? And why I told you when we first met that I wasn't what you thought? I thought he was a vampire, which he was. You aren't a bloodsucker? That's not all I am. He stood and strode to a trunk set against the wall. Flicking it open, he pulled a blanket out and tossed it to me. You have goosebumps on your arms. I caught the blanket and wrapped it around my shoulders. I wasn't really cold, but a good ghost story always needed a blanket around the person who was being told. And I had a feeling this was going to be a whopper of a ghost story. Ferris stood in the middle of the room, his one hand on his hip as his eyes grew distant, fading to a time long before I was born. The year 1710 was the year I was born, near Salem, Massachusetts, but it was only 12 years into my life that I began to understand things were not always as they seemed. I bolted into our house, after riding my pony all day through the fields outside the city, tracking mud and horse dung along with me. Our cook, Mrs. Watson, took a swat at me that I managed to avoid with ease. I'm so sorry, Mrs. Watson. Your beauty stole my senses, rendering me a fool, which is why I forgot to remove the dung from my boots. At 12, I was already shockingly handsome and knew a smile and charming word went a long way to getting me out of trouble with the women. Ah, get yourself gone, boy. She put a sweet tart into my hand as I gave her a courtly bow. Go on, go see your mama. She's not well. Kicking off my boots, I ran in my stocking feet through the house, up the spiraled stairway, and into my mother's room. She lay on the bed, her fine blonde hair spread out on the pale blue pillowcases stacked up behind her. Ferris, my love, come sit with me. Her voice was so soft, and I forgot I was a young man, crawling in a bed with her like the child I truly still was. I laid my head on her shoulder, and she stroked my hair. Do you think you will love your brother or sister when they come? Of course, because he will be my brother. She laughed softly. So sure you are that it is a boy. What if it is a little sister? Then I will protect her like I protect you. My voice was fierce, and yet I clung to her. The juxtaposition was not lost on me now. But looking back, I loved my mother with a strength that knew no bounds. She was the most beautiful woman I'd ever known. Her eyes, blue like mine, filled with love and belief when she looked at me. I knew I could never let her down. She was my world, and anything she did I would defend to my grave. I fell asleep against her, my sweet tart forgotten. A hand shaking my shoulder woke me hours later. Come, boy, it's time to eat. My father stirred me, and I slid from the bed in my mother's arms to follow him to the dining room. We ate in near silence, and yet I tried to be the man I wanted to be. My father was tall and lean, his dark brown hair swept back into a ponytail. All the women thought he was dashing, that he was the rogue of the town, with my mother finally taming him. All I saw was the hero I wanted to be as I grew. My mother was the fine princess, my father the dashing knight. They could do no wrong, and they loved me. But of course, that was not the real world, but I faced it a few days later. The screaming is what woke me from a dead sleep. I shot out of my bed, running before I knew what had happened, only that my mother was in pain. I burst into her room to see the physician hovering over her shoulder, shaking his head as she writhed in agony I couldn't understand. Sweat slicked her normally golden hair into a dull, tarnished copper. My father stood beside her, gripping her fingers tightly. Beloved, we can only save one of you. The baby, she whispered, her eyes flicking open and seeing me. I can only imagine the look on my face, for she started to cry. Faris, love, come il me a minute. "There is no time," the physician said, opening his bag and pulling out a wicked-looking blade. I ran to him, punched him in the jaw, dropping him like a sack of potatoes. "Ferris, no!" My father grabbed me, yanking me back. "Thomas, please let me say goodbye to him." Her blue eyes begged my father, begged him to have one last moment with me. "There is no time, beloved," he said, his voice hitching with tears. And then I was shoved outside of the room, and my mother was screaming. And I was screaming as I kicked and punched at the door. Blood dripped from my knuckles, but I felt nothing. I knew only the panic of a child being forced to grow up in a matter of seconds. I wanted to believe my mother would survive, but she'd told them to save the baby. Would my father listen to her? Would he do as she asked or defy her? So we had her longer. Selfish, I didn't care. I wanted my mother to live and to hold me again. I was on my knees, head against the door when the screaming stopped, fading into nothing. The silence stung my ears, and I held my breath, hope surging through me, not realizing yet what the silence really meant. I thought maybe they'd saved her, that the pain had stopped because she was okay, and they'd saved both my mother and the baby. A warmth spread through my knees, and I looked down to see blood seeping out under the door, staining my breeches. I scrambled to my feet, the sound of footsteps jerking my head up. They were dull, heavy steps, like an impending doom walking my way. I wanted to run away, run to the stables and leap on my horse, and not look back. I wanted to pinch myself and wake, realizing it had been nothing but a bad dream. Yet I stood there, forced myself to stand like the man I wanted to be. My father opened the door, a small bundle in his arms. He handed it to me. "Take the babe to Mrs. Watson." His eyes were empty of life as he shut the door with a solid click. I looked into the face of an angel. She looked like my mother, even that young. The turn of her nose, shape of her mouth and chin. She blinked pale blue eyes up at me, but didn't cry, didn't squawk once. I took the stairs carefully and found my way into the kitchen. Mrs. Watson tried to take my sister, but I held her tight. "I'll feed her." "Oh, Lovey, your mama would be proud of you." We didn't say the words, but we both knew. Only one of them could have survived, and I held the proof of the choice in my arms. I said nothing, just helped Mrs. Watson feed my little sister. I wanted to name her, to call her by my mother's name, but I struggled to find the words. The breath to speak seemed to evade me. So I sat there, holding my little sister, tears tracking my cheeks and splashing onto her perfect skin. We were like that, she and I, for many years. At 12, I became a father in essence, if not in truth. Little Angela, she grew and thrived in our home, even if our true father was somewhat absent. His grief consumed him, drove him, and took him away from us. My father descended into his study, looking for what I now know was a way to bring my mother back. You see, he had magic, but refused to use it. The times were such that magic could have him burned. Even though the witch trials of Salem were over, accidental deaths still happened. More than that, I believe the regret of not using his power, of maybe having been able to save my mother, but watching her die, tortured him. Still his fear held him back. And the worst part was he found it. He unlocked the power within himself. I was 25. Angela had just turned 13. We came home from riding in the park to find things were not as they had been when we'd left. The first thing I noticed was the smell, the scent of rotting flesh. Then it was the dirt smeared on the kitchen floor, and Mrs. Watson was missing. I put Angela behind me and lifted a finger to my lips. We crept through the kitchen and into the parlor. Our father stood in the center of the room, Mrs. Watson at his feet, blood pooling around her head. Angela gasped and let out a whimper. But of course, that wasn't the worst of it. Swaying in the corner of the room, there stood a figure in a worm-eaten wedding gown, jagged pieces of blonde hair cascading down her back. I knew in that moment who it was. Angela. Run to the stables and hide. I kept my voice low, never taking my eyes off the scene in front of me. Another gasp and she did as I asked, her footsteps receding quickly. I waited until I was sure she was gone before stepping farther into the parlor. "Father, what have you done?" "I brought her back. I finally did it. The church can go to hell. I won't be denied my beloved one." His words had no conviction. There was no denying what he'd brought back was missing everything that made up a living person. She moved, she reacted to things, but it wasn't my mother. It wasn't my father's beloved. She wasn't the one we missed. Not anymore. You have to put her back. I held my hand out to him, pleading, let her body rest. All there is left of her are Angela and me. We are here. We need a father. I didn't think I needed a father, no, but I knew Angela loved him dearly and wanted him to take notice of her. Of course, the fact that she mirrored his lost wife both thrilled and repelled him. He nodded slowly. You're right, I know you are. I had to try. This power, there is so much of it. You have it in you too. I cleared my throat, not wanting to discuss the subject until the dead body was where it belonged, in the ground. Back then we didn't call them zombies. They were the walking dead, and they were a curse laid on people. I didn't want to see her face, but she turned. The shape of her skull bit through her skin. There were bits and pieces of her face hanging. Rage lit through me, that he would do this to her, that he would force me to see her face that way, to steal the memories I had of my mother and replace them with that thing. We fought, my father and I. I waited until he put her back in the ground, and then we had it out. Fists and words, and finally he drew a gun on me, pressed it against my chest, and pulled the trigger. I fell, eyes wide as I stared up at him. Angela was screaming, and the world bent around me as I fell. It will be all right, I'll wait for you, I said, knowing I would at least be with my mother then. Only, I didn't go to my mother, not as I thought I would have. I woke to the taste of blood on my lips and a familiar scent in my nose. Soft satin brushed against my cheek. It took me too long to realize what had happened. Too long to stop myself. It will be all right, I'll wait for you, were the last words Angela whispered to me as her body went limp in my arms, my teeth marks in her neck. My father screaming that I'd killed her, that I was a monster. But he was the one who'd made me. You see, vampires were originally created by necromancers, and my father, upon shooting his only son, thought it prudent to bring him back to life. Only not as a rotter. That wouldn't do. No, he brought me back as a vampire, catching my soul before it fled. And when I woke, out of my mind with hunger, I attacked Angela, drained her body completely. Killed my sister, the closest thing I would ever have to a daughter. From that moment on, I didn't know who I hated more, my father or myself. And when you brought him back with you, when you brought Thomas to Doran's home, it wasn't the vampires he feared, it was me. He didn't want to face me, even after all these years. Because what I know now, and what I'm sure he came to see too, was that it all fell in his lap. A new vampire has no control, has very little ability to do anything but feed and hide from the light. And that is the story of how I came to be, of why I can jump the veil with ease. It is the blood of a necromancer that flows through my veins. That is why I can do what other vampires cannot. Chapter 9. I stared at Ferris, his story still ringing in my ears. Thomas was your father? Thomas, the necromancer, with a gazillion fucking zombies buried in his yard. Yes, and Birgit killed him. My heart ached from his story, and it had a ring of truth that even I wouldn't deny. Ferris had done some shitty things, but his beginning had been fucking awful, to say the least. And even I wasn't so cold as to not feel he'd been dealt a rough hand. Yes, she did, but from what I saw, he egged her on. I think it was his way of committing suicide. He was ready to go. We'd had a discussion about the past, and we'd come to an agreement not to bring it up again. He kept his eyes down, and without thinking, I leaned forward and brushed back a long piece of his hair. He seemed so lost, like the little boy he spoke about. I'm sorry for all your losses. At least in that, we understand each other. He gave a dry laugh and nodded. True, in grief, we are very alike. Except I've not lost anyone I loved since I became a vampire. Because you wouldn't allow yourself to love? I spit it out before I thought better of it. Mostly because I already knew the answer. Ferris stared hard at me, and I squirmed in my seat. No, I have not. There is something I would offer you, though, now that you know the truth about me. What is that? I tightened my grip on the blanket, wondering. Necromancers, they can allow a spirit into their body for a time. Not long, but long enough to speak to them. Peeta lifted her head and stared at a spot to the left of Ferris. At seemingly nothing, but maybe at Liam? He wouldn't have left me if he could stay with me. You mean Liam, don't you? I'm not saying it would be enjoyable for me, but as a sign of peace between us. He lifted his eyebrows at me, leaving the choice in my hands. A chance to speak to Liam. I've spoken with him, in my dreams. And is that good enough for you? Ferris pushed, and a niggling of doubt worked its way into my heart. Good enough? Nothing would ever be good enough. But the vampire was right. Any time with Liam was worth a chance. All right. Do you need me to do anything? No. I just don't want to be accused of anything after. What was he talking about? He closed his eyes, and his head slumped forward until his chin rested on his chest. His body relaxing, and then tension flowed through him as he lifted his head. His eyes slowly opened. Golden eyes. My lips trembled. Liam? Mira. Why did you let him call me? I reached out, wanting to touch him, even though it was Ferris's body. He offered, and You of all people should know by now that Ferris doesn't do anything for anyone without a reason. He bit the words out, Ferris's voice, but Liam through and through. I don't understand, I whispered, not wanting to fight with him. He can use the powers of any who posses him. He motioned to the stump of his arm, which was, holy shit, it's growing back. I did reach out then and touch his arm. I'm the only guardian he could have called, that he would have permission to call. You gave him the right to call me. How long do you have? He shrugged. I don't know. I let the blanket drop, not taking my eyes from his. Then hold me, while you can. His one arm reached out and I curled into his lap. It wasn't Liam, and yet I could feel him there. Feel the man I loved under the skin of one I was so uncertain of. You should have told me what you were planning. And if I'd understood, I would have let you go. And you and I could have said goodbye properly. Who was it that wielded the knife? He grunted as if I'd punched him. Don't be too hard on her. I asked her to help. It had to be someone who loved me, and I couldn't ask you to do that. There was only one other her it could be. Pamela? You asked Pamela to kill you. I jerked out of his lap. Fury and horror lashed my heart. Liam, how could you do that? She's a child. There was no other choice. He shot up out of his seat, and in his eyes I saw the uncertainty. The worry he'd made a mistake. I ran a hand over my face. She's not like us. Giselle said the darkness would pull on her. You think this is going to help? Fucking hell, man. You should have told me. His hand, Ferris's, brushed along my cheek. You're right. I should have told you. Should have trusted you. I'm sorry. I made a mess of this. I clamped my fingers around his. That's usually my job. And nice job on the arm. He glanced down, flexing his new fingers. Yeah, not bad. A grimace passed over his face. Ferris is trying to take control back. And then Liam was gone. Again. Ferris thumped his head back against the wall, a small smile on his lips. No kisses? I was hoping. You asshole. You just wanted a new arm. I paced the room, Peeta striding with me. The vampire shrugged. What can I say? It worked out for both of us. It did not. If you wanted it to work out, you should have just fucked off and let Liam have your body. His eyes narrowed as I came back to face him. Who told you that could happen? My mouth went dry. No one. His face smoothed. Perhaps we should go back to the original conversation. But my mind was racing. Could Liam take Ferris's body? I had to believe it was possible with what Ferris said. You still have not told me why you so badly need my blood. Becoming a vampire will not help you defeat Orion. He pointed to his new arm, so recently a stump. I cleared my throat and looked up. No, I don't want to become a vampire. I reached inside my back pocket and pulled out the slip of paper that had the spell written on it and slapped it against his chest. Eyes narrowed in the dim light. He read it over. What is this for? I see it as a spell, but that is all I can glimmer from it. It will speed up my pregnancy, so the baby comes sooner and I can recover, which will allow me to. I wasn't even finished speaking before Ferris threw the spell back at me in a crumpled ball. You would risk your child for the convenience of not being pregnant? The fury on his face was not something new, but the reason for it was. Peeta put herself between the vampire and me. I smoothed the paper out, folded the spell, and tucked it into my pocket, keeping my eyes on his face. I had to convince him this was the only way. What would you do if you only had a few months with Angela? That after those months you would probably never see her again? That those months were all you had? What would you do to extend that time? The anger slipped out of him, and he deflated until he was sitting back in his chair. Anything, I'd risk anything for her. A nod was all I could manage. Emotion clogged my throat, and I needed a moment to let the feeling pass before I could speak again. I want time with my baby, Ferris. And while I will tell everyone else I'm doing this so I can recover quicker, get back into shape, the truth of it is, I'm being selfish. I want as much time with her as possible before I have to leave her behind. Probably for what will be forever. My eyes filled with tears as I spoke, then overflowed and dripped down my face onto my t-shirt. I slumped into the chair opposite him. It will be harder for you to leave her if you have more time. He moved so he could crouch in front of me. I don't care. I want her to have as much time with me as possible. His arm was across my knees, and he leaned into me. You know for sure it's a girl? Yes. He put his forehead against mine, and we sat like that, together in our grief. His long gone, and mine so recent. A minute passed, and my tears dried. Ferris stood and walked across the room. There was a tinkle of glass bottles, and I turned in my seat to see him pulling an empty crystal decanter off a shelf. The decanter was very thin, more like a vial, but the cut of the glass made it decorative. I need your help. I moved to his side. He handed me the flask. Hold it just below here like this. He showed me where. A flash of fangs, and then he bit into his wrist, holding the wound over the open vial lid. A few drops are all you should need. The crystal glass filled within 10 seconds, and he took his wrist away and then handed me a tiny cork. I put the stopper in, pressing it hard to make sure there would be no leakage. Thank you. His lips twisted up into a grimace of a smile. Maybe I'm not such an asshole. I gave him a smile, though I knew it was tired. Hell, it felt like it was going to fall off my face. Maybe. Beside me, Peta grabbed at my shirt and tugged me back to my chair, all but shoving me into it. She was right. I was exhausted. You're sure they will go away in the morning sunlight? Positive. And Blas will be okay? Positive. I wrapped myself in the blanket, cuddling down into it. I'm going to sleep for a bit. And there was no answer because I was already gone into dreamland. In the early hours of the morning, I startled awake, dreams of blood and fire chasing me through my sleep. I stretched and then froze. I wasn't in my chair. I was in Ferris's arms. Before I could say anything, he was placing me back in my chair. You wouldn't shut up talking and moaning in your sleep. You were driving me crazy. He all but snapped at me, and I was a bit taken aback. I didn't fucking well do it on purpose. I returned his tone and upped the ante. In other words, we were back to our usual relationship, the tears and stories of just a few hours before and the bonding that came with them. Gone in 2 sentences. Better that way in the long run. No doubt I would start to trust Ferris, and then he'd turn on me again. That was his MO, taking trust and trashing it the minute you really needed him. Standing, I stretched and stared at the door. It's quiet out there. Dawn is coming. They'll be heading back to their little hidey holes soon. Won't be long, and you can leave. An hour at most. The rumble of Blas waking rolled through my head, his memory of the pygmy demons and how they swarmed him, how they'd been chattering my name. A rush of fury and fear shot from him to me. Mira. I flinched and clapped my hands over my ears, even though it did no good. Blas, I'm fine. Be there in an hour. His panic ebbed, and I let out a slow breath, letting him see through my memories of the night. Ferris saved you? Yes. I was acutely aware of Ferris across from me. The vampire sat in his chair, semi-slumped, and his eyes at half-mast. What will you do once we're gone? What do you mean? He tipped his head back, baring his throat to me. I lifted one hand and waved it at the door. I mean, how can you survive these demons? What I was trying to figure out was, did I have to invite him to come with me? The part of me that was touched by his story and the fact he'd comforted me, even if I'd been asleep, was okay with the idea of him coming with us. That other part of me, the one that remembered all the fucking awful things he'd done, the lies and pain he'd caused. Yeah, that side didn't want anything to do with him, or have him anywhere near when I would be fighting to get through the last of my pregnancy. I've been hunting them, at Doran's orders. There is no saving those possessed, so we're killing them. That's what your friends are doing while you're off on your vacation. Jaw tight. I struggled against the words that swelled my throat. And then I surprised us both. Thank you. Tell Doran I'm doing what I can to speed things up, and I'll be back as soon as I'm able. I turned away from him and put a hand on the door. Sending out a thread, I tracked demons and got a few pings outside the door. To be exact, I could handle that many. I slid a blade loose and opened the door while Ferris stood behind me, speechless. The first two demons just stared up at me as I took their heads, their mouths hanging open. I wasn't angry. All I felt was the love I had for my friends and family, for my unborn baby and all she represented. Hope, love, life. The demons broke apart, spraying into the pre-dawn air with a burst of light. Still tracking demons, I made my way through the house, taking them out as I came across them, working on a level of instinct I'd never felt before. It was as if I were tracking not only the demons, but everything around me. I knew where to slash and thrust, killing the demons before they ever had a chance. And through it all, I felt nothing but all I held dear. There was no more fear, no more anger, just a surety of what I was doing, I did for the right reasons. That no matter what Ferris or anyone said, I was where I was supposed to be, and in the end, no matter how hard or ugly it might be, everything would be all right. As the first hint of the rising sun peeked over the watery horizon, the last of the demons fled. In the recesses of my head, their threads beckoned me. It would be easy enough to hunt them during the day and finish them off, but then I would kill them all, but I'd hate for you to get sloppy. I slid my blade into its sheath, then looked over my shoulder at Ferris. He stood in the shadows of the building, his eyes bright but unreadable, golden, and then blue once more. I think that's the longest you've gone without saying fuck in the entire time I've known you, he said. Maybe I'm growing up, like you said. I answered, and he laughed. Oh, I doubt that, Tracker. I think, though, maybe you were changing. The last battle comes, and you need to be at your best. Go and take care of yourself. He gave me a smile, and I nodded at him, unable to do more. Whenever I fought demons, I was always exhausted after, as if I'd been drained to the point of nothing left. I barely recalled making it to Blas, slipping my winter coat on, Peta shifting into her small form, and slipping inside my coat, giving me an instant heater. I managed to get myself tied onto his back, and then we were in the air, and I remembered nothing until we landed at Tian Shan. Chapter 10. My dreams consisted of blood and pain, of seeing a young Ferris, holding his dead mother, and that merged into him, holding me as I fought to give birth to a monster. I jerked away with a gasp, and Peta gave a soft meow from inside my jacket. I rubbed my face and looked around. We were in the courtyard in the monastery, and the light had shifted. Before you ask, we've been back for a few hours, but you were sleeping and I didn't want to wake you. He paused, his hesitation coming through loud and clear. Say what you've got to say. Until the baby comes, no more adventures. You can't take chances anymore. I didn't argue with him. Slowly, my limbs stiff, I undid the leather straps and slid from his back. I don't think I have it in me. I need to rest. Finally, you speak some sense. Now go find your uncle. He is not pleased with you, and I have something I need to do. Promise me you will not go anywhere until I'm back. Swear it, on your life. A bit melodramatic, but I swear I will not go anywhere until you're back. Unless my life will depend on it. Good enough. And in a whoosh of leathery wings and a downdraft that made me stumble, he was in the air and winging away. The stiffness in me faded as I walked. I kept an arm around my middle where Peta slept, and then I looked down, really looked. With my jacket on, I looked. Pregnant, Peta filling out the space where a child would grow. Whoa, I whispered, my hands holding the curve. Not whoa. Why the hell didn't you take me with you? Eric said, crushing me in a hug before I realized what he was doing. Peta squirmed, and I pushed him away so she could slip out of my coat. Her hair was all roughed up, and she glared up at us. I smiled and gave her a wink. Her face softened, and she winked back, then trotted off in the direction of my room, the white tip of her tail a tiny flag. I don't know. I finally answered, hugging him back, laying my head on his broad chest. I think I just needed one last time out on my own. Or maybe I thought you'd hold me back. Old man. He snorted and tightened his grip on me. You're the only family I have, Mira. As much as I know it's your job to stop Orion, to save the world, to me you are the niece I love with all my heart. A thick tightness wrapped itself around my throat, and I closed my eyes. I'm sorry. It's okay, I know you have to do what you have to do. Doesn't mean I like it. He led me to the dining room, a spread of food laid out. I sat and tucked in, hunger flaring in me. From across the room, Daisy headed my way, Zane in her arms. I think he's missed you, she said, giving the little boy to me before I could protest. He lay in my arms, green eyes staring up at me, little hands reaching for my face. He let out a coo, and his fingers touched my cheek. It seems he's growing so fast. He is, but then, all babies grow fast when you haven't seen them for a day or two. She laughed. With your own, you won't see it until you look back. I held him, rocking, until his eyes drooped and his hands dropped to his blankets. Millie's boy, my girl. I wondered if they would be friends as they grew up, or would they fight like cats and dogs? I handed Zane back to Daisy. I have a little more to do, and then I can help you more with him. She laughed again, her eyes crinkling up. Oh, he's an easy baby. I don't mind at all. As Daisy left, Eric touched my hand to get my attention. She lost her child just before we showed up, which is why she can nurse him. She's a good girl, a good mother. I wonder why he was telling me that. I could see she was a good sort, even with my ability to track Tam down in the monastery. We finished eating, and I sat while the supernaturals around us talked. I knew I was stalling. Peeta knew a fire elemental. I had the venom and the blood, and we knew the words that needed to be said over the mixture to make it kindle. But I just sat there thinking, it wasn't pain I was afraid of. No, it was that this was all happening so fast. 1 minute I was just a tracker, chasing demons and trying to stop the bad shit in the world. And now I was going to be a mother of a child that I'd not planned on, yet wouldn't deny for all the world. I stood and left the table, left behind the murmuring voices and flow of energy that, if I was honest, was incredibly soothing. The monastery was truly a place of peace and safety. Back in my room, I found Katya sitting on my bed, her legs dangling. How could you leave your parents? She smiled up at me. They're my parents, not my keepers. I have things to do, as do those given great power. My age is irrelevant. I was shocked as always at how grown up she sounded. That, and she was becoming more eloquent with her words every time we spoke. I see. Well, I need to find a fire elemental. Peeta knows. Yes, I need her to lead me to her. Peeta, who'd been stretched out on my bed, rolled to her feet and hopped to the floor. We followed her as she padded down the hallway and through to a room I'd seen before. Peeta trotted into the middle of the sand-filled room and leapt onto the chest of the man lying there. He let out a grunt and opened his eyes. If I thought Zane had green eyes, they had nothing on this guy's. They glowed green, as if there was a fire lit behind them. Peeta, get off me. He tried to push her, but she dug her claws in. Get off, cat. She let out a low growl and shifted into her leopard form, right on top of him. I watched with amusement as he yelped and hollered, twisted and tried to shove her off. Finally, he succeeded and sat up, sand falling from his back. Damn cat. Familiars think so highly of themselves. If I can give you a piece of advice, avoid them. I thought about Alex. I already have a Klingon. I don't think I have room in my life for a familiar. Grunting, he stood, then looked at me. Really looked at me. Ed? A cold shiver swept through me, that single word hitting me hard. That was my mom. Did you know her? His eyes widened and his mouth flapped several times before he managed to say anything coherent. You look just like her. Talk about family resemblance. I licked my lips. Look, I'd love to talk to you about her. Really, I would. But I need your help. I'm prepping a spell, and I need a fire elemental to help me. Are you? Are you an elemental? The thing was, he didn't look like an elemental. He looked like a hippie dug up from the 60s, his long red hair a tangled mess, lean body dressed in a Jesus robe, bare feet. Yeah, not someone who'd inspire confidence. He yawned and stretched. Yeah, I am. Kinda. Name's Cactus. Mira. And kinda, what the hell does that mean? I stepped into the room, the heat in the sand seeming to reach me even through my boots. Means I'm a half-breed. Fire on one side, earth on the other. But if you just need me to heat something, he held his left hand out, palm up, and swept his right hand, palm down over it. A flame opened up across his left hand, dancing along his skin. Impressive. And yes, I think that's all we need. I stepped back, and he shook his head. If you have a spell of some sort, I say we do it here. I have a closer connection to the Mother Goddess, and she can help if things go sideways. Nothing should go sideways, I said. Yeah, but if you're anything like your mom, things go sideways whether you want them to or not. A smile twitched his lips, and I so badly wanted to pick his brain, to find out what he knew about her. The journal from my mom had been burnt to ash in the fire that took out my house in North Dakota. Written words were one thing, but the ability to hear stories about her from someone who wasn't in love with her, as in not my uncle, that was pretty cool. Maybe later we can discuss my mom, but right now I need to do this. If you're willing to help. Anything for Elle's little girl. I pulled the flask and the crystal vial out from under my coat. I unstopped them and mixed them back and forth. The blood was red, the venom a dark blue, and the resulting mix was a deep purple. I held the crystal vial out to Cactus. He took it and I called on Ophelia since Blas had left. I need the words now, Ophelia, if you don't mind. From dawn until dawn, from night to night, from wing to wing. Let the blood heat and hearts kindle in the fire that is life. May that which would steal our life become our sustenance, and let our breath give our love wings to fly through the darkest night and the worst storms. I repeated it softly to myself, several times with Ophelia correcting me here and there until I had it right. I nodded at Cactus. Okay, light it up slow, and then bring it to a boil, then I'll say the words. You sure that's how it needs to be done? I pinched my lips together, thinking before I answered. Yes, this is it. He held the vial and slowly began to heat it, just by holding it as I whispered the words. Then Cactus switched hands. I'll let it cool, and when it's cool enough but still hot, that's when I would drink it. I nodded my agreement, nerves getting the better of me. I'm scared. The words escaped me, but Cactus didn't know me, and somehow that made it safe to speak the truth. He gave me a smile. I remember your mom. She was scared when she found out she was pregnant with you. Your dad, Bram, he was ecstatic, unable to believe he was going to be a father. They came here, to hide until you were born. Who were they hiding from? From me. And the demons, even then, Eric said, coming into the room. They hid from me because I was pissed she chose him over me. And that was when the first prophecies came to light that a tracker would be the one to stop Orion's plans. He's been hunting you a long time. Cactus handed me the vial. Bottoms up. I took it, the glass still uncomfortably warm. I pressed it to my lips, took a deep breath, and gulped down the contents. Fire and blood was my first thought, the coppery tang hot on my tongue, and then it hit my bloodstream. An explosion along my nerve endings, and I was falling. Someone caught me, and that was the last I remembered. The next thing I knew, cold cloths were placed on my forehead, and Katya was inside my head. These pains will ease soon. She's growing quickly. I didn't answer her, just let the contortions my body was doing wash through me. I could feel the baby growing, and I knew she wasn't exactly having a good time of things either. I'm sorry, sweet one. It will be done soon. I whispered and put a hand over my already substantially larger belly. At some point, the pain eased off, and I fell asleep. And Liam was there waiting for me. Dark hair and golden eyes, a body made hard by all the years of working out, and then the rigors of becoming a werewolf. I ran my hands up his arms and over his biceps to rest on his shoulders. He placed his hands on my hips. I don't want to speak about our last visit. I don't know how much time I have. Sounds good to me. I laid my head on his chest and breathed in his smell. None of it was real, but I didn't care. I just needed to feel him for that moment. You always have things to do, trouble to find. I tightened my grip on him as the dream tried to slip away from me, and I swallowed hard, knowing what I had to do. I have to focus, Liam, on what's in front of me. He stroked my hair with one hand and rubbed my back with the other. I know. I'm just surprised you figured it out already. I didn't. Not really. I saw a cactus, letting the world pass him by for the bliss of oblivion. I see Eric grieving still the loss of my mother. All these people living in the past. They missed out on the world. And more than that, they miss out on what they could be. I lifted my head to look into his face. Kiss me goodbye, Liam. I have to face what I was born to do. When I'm done, I reached up and touched his jaw. Then we can be together. His eyes were sad, but he smiled. I will be there, even if you can't see me, love. Know that. He pressed his lips to mine, parted them with his tongue, and I kissed him back. Emotions flowed between us, love, sorrow, lust, and an unbreakable bond. Underneath it all was something I needed more than anything else. Hope that this wasn't the end, that my words would prove to be prophetic, and I would be with him, that maybe we could even be a family. I didn't know how it would happen. I only knew that as long as I believed, there was a chance. Hope, a word I barely knew anymore, yet I clung to it and all it represented for me. A world with Liam in it was worth hoping for, worth believing, worth fighting for, and that, more than anything else, was something I understood. If nothing else, I would never stop fighting, no matter how much pain and loss was slung my way. I broke away from Liam and smiled up at him, my heart feeling lighter than it had and longer than I could remember. Don't forget me, Wolf. He gave me a half bow. Blood of the lost. I would sooner forget everything in my life and forsake my soul. Still smiling, I let go of that dream and slid into sleep, a smile on my lips. In the distance I heard him, as if he stood beside me and held my hand. I will always love you, Mira. You and our wolf cub. Always. Chapter 11. So it turned out that something about the spell I whipped together was the extra strength prescription. Never mind a month. 2 weeks later, I was in labor. Yeah, not my idea of a fun time. The only upside was the whole pushing a baby out and opening that didn't seem big. Enough thing was over in less than a day. Daisy helped, and the details, well, some things are better left to the imagination. But after that, pain as if I were being ripped apart, feeling like it would never end after all that shit was done. None of it mattered once I had her in my arms. The little one cradled in my arms was mine. I stared into her tiny face, astounded that I was a mom. Jet black hair like Liam, but her eyes were closer to mine, only 2 colors instead of 3. A deep chocolate brown flecked with gold. She blinked sleepily at me, then smiled, and I was gone. My heart was no longer my own. I stroked her cheek with a finger. What are we going to name you, little one? Daisy laughed, her mirth shaking the bed. Oh, her name will come to you when she is ready. For now, just love her. She patted my shoulder, leaned over, and kissed my forehead, as if we were family. And considering what we'd just been through together, I would say she was family indeed. I let out a sigh, rolled over, and tucked my girl against me, a sense of contentment I'd never expected to feel washing over me. This was what Doran had said when he'd told me I would love another. Not another man, no, Liam held that spot in my heart. But this love for this tiny little one was so intense, so pure, and I would do anything to keep her safe, to help her grow strong and true. Anything. Marcella. I whispered her name as I fell asleep, knowing in my heart Liam would approve. A bit of my mother, El, and the rest, the god of war. It was a strong name, one I hoped would serve her well. The first few months flew by, filled with learning how to bathe, feed, and change diapers of 2 fast-growing babies. Zane took to Marcella as if they had known each other for years. They would lay side by side, holding tiny fingers as they stared up at the sky in the central garden, warm breezes blowing over them. They would lay and laugh at each other, and I would do my workouts beside them. Sometimes Bao would help, teaching me a more relaxed fighting style that meant I would wait for an attacker to come to me and deflect, turning their blows away and allowing them to tire themselves out. I wasn't sure it would work on the kind of asshats I encountered, but it was worth learning. And it forced me to keep my focus, something I was having a hard time with, now that Marcella, or Mars as she was quickly becoming, was in my life. But for her, I forced myself through, and slowly my body came back together. The 2 weeks of baby growing in triple time had pulled muscles, torn ligaments, and stretched me without mercy. The only good thing was I had the time to rebuild myself. Eric and I trained with weapons, swords, crossbows, knives, and of course, dealing with demons. For that, we made forays into the world with blahs, pinpointed a demon, and went after it, or them as the case sometimes was. Once a week until killing demons was as easy as using one of my blades. And in some ways it was easier, because to kill a demon took love. You had to do it with love, not anger or hate or fear, because all those did was feed the demon and make it stronger. With Marcella in my life, it was easy to fight for love, easy to hold on to the emotions she built in me. And I wondered if that was why I needed to be a mother. I wondered if I would have been able to face Orion without that love in my life. I questioned Eric, and he had given me a smile that was sad and full of regret. I think you're right. A mother's love is like nothing else. There is nothing stronger in the world than a love between a parent and child. Orion can't face that. He has no concept of that power. I hope he was right. I doubted Orion would be easy to kill, him or his 4 generals. But for that moment, I knew I was doing everything I could. Blas and I flew with Ophelia, working out strategies for fighting in the air. Every day we worked, and I grew more and more comfortable with being on Blas without being tied to his back. Coyote helped me increase my speed, learning how to anticipate the attacks of a supernatural who outranked me in that department. Every person I had around me helped me to train, to strengthen, and prepare for the coming battles. Because I was sure there would be more than one. In every spare moment I had, I played with Mars, held her close, kissed her nose, and promised her I would come back for her. Begged her to understand how much she meant to me. That I would leave because I had to, not because I wanted to. She just cooed and smiled up at me, which only made what was coming that much harder. Because the 6 months was swiftly coming to an end. 6 months of peace, of being safe and finding my center, of getting stronger and prepping. Liam had given me the 3 things I needed more than anything else. The time to prep myself, the people who could help me, and a love I would fight for to the ends of the world and back. I held the violet-skinned book in my hands, open to the page I'd been reading. Marcella was sleeping softly in my bed, her tiny hands curled up under her chin. I reached over and brushed my fingers across her forehead. "Don't wake her. She just got quiet," Eric said from the doorway, and I gave him a wry grin. "I know, but there isn't much time left," I whispered. "No, there's not. You finally break down and decided to read the book." I let out a sigh and nodded. I held it out to him, knowing the page he would read was one I had memorized. It was the only page that mattered to me. The rest were vague. This one was to the point. "And when the darkness comes, and a plague sweeps the world, the blood of the lost shall be the one to save us. 2 things must she do. Find the destroyers so they may bring their blood together, and bind herself to the darkness." Eric's eyes were on my face. Find the destroyer? Pete is elemental. At this point, that is all I know. I don't even have a name. Cactus just shakes his head when I ask. He doesn't know, or maybe he doesn't remember. In the other part, I stood and shooed him out of the room, shutting the door behind us as we stood in the hallway. "You bound Bert to you, didn't you?" Eric stiffened. "You can't mean to bind or iron to you." "Yes, I think that's what it's asking me to do." "He can't kill me then." My uncle let out a tired breath. "That is true. Are you sure, though? You can pick up on their thoughts when you bind yourself to them." I shrugged. "It will keep me safe longer and keep Orion on his toes then. It may even give us the edge we need to keep ahead of him and his generals if I'm picking up on his thoughts. But first you have to find him and then bind him to you." I nodded, and Eric put his hands on my shoulders. "I'll show you again how to do it." He did, and it was simple. Blood on blood in one phrase. To thee, I bind my blood and thoughts. To me, I bind your life. Easy peasy. Right. And then the day to leave was there, sneaking up on me like a thief in the night, there to steal my most precious of precious things. I held Marcella in my arms, and she cried softly, sensing something was wrong. I didn't fight the tears that streaked my face. "I'll come back for you, little love. I'll come back." I was leaving most of my friends behind. Eric, Coyote, Cactus, and of course, Katya. Those 4 were staying to act as guardians for Marcella and Zane. Daisy would be her surrogate once I was gone. Blas, of course, was coming with me, as was Peta. And of all the people I didn't expect to show, a tall blonde figure stepped out of the shadows. Ferris. I glared at Blas. What did you do, go back and get him? And left him in a local village, not far from here. I knew you wouldn't want him around Marcella, but he can help. You know that. My anger slipped away, because all that meant nothing as I breathed in the smell of my little girl, a hint of sunshine and baby powder, and a scent so indefinable, I could only call it baby. My baby. And I was leaving her. Eric took her from me. She'll be safe here. You know that. You know Orion has marked her as the one to claim now. And he will find a way if she isn't in the monastery. Of course, I knew all that, but it was good to hear again to help me make my feet walk away from the piece of my heart that now beats outside my chest. I climbed up Blas, my body stronger than it had ever been, my mind clear and my heart full of love. The three hags were there, watching, swooning with desire for the emotions I was giving off. I did my best to ignore them, to remember that was another price I had paid. Bao slipped up beside me. And now the last piece. I will take your memories of this place to give us safety. I bowed my head, as did Blas, Peta, and a reluctant Ferris. I can still recall this place, I said, but the name had already slipped from my mind. Bao smiled. It will go as you fly away, piece by piece, until all you love will be safe again. I thanked him, bowing at the waist. The things I needed to make the last stand against Orion were here. And even though I was leaving them behind, I knew that their love went with me. From Blas's back, my loved ones ranged out. Eric holding Marcella, Daisy holding Zane, Ophelia, Coyote, and Cactus waving at us. Ferris leapt behind me and strapped himself in. Peta curled up in front of me, which I knew I would be grateful for once we were in the cold night sky. Let's go. We have to find this destroyer first, yes? Blas lifted into the air before I was ready. But then, I doubted I'd ever be truly ready to leave. I fixed Marcella safe in my heart, in my mind, and looked across the dark night sky ahead of us, endless in the stars scattered on the blue velvet. No, we don't go after her first. Then what are we doing, Mira? Ferris asked, irritation plain in his voice. First we go home. Blas let out a roar of excitement, and even I felt the thrill of seeing the rest of my family. Alex, Pamela, and Eve, and Doran. We had a week before the time limit was up on the veil, when it would open once more and the demons would be able to travel easily again. A week to find the destroyer. I grinned back at Ferris. You ready for a wild ride? He snorted. Tracker, you think this hasn't been a wild ride up till now? You have a point, I said, and twisted forward to face the future. The wind swept up and around us, bringing a sound that sent shivers down my back. A wolf's howl, but how we heard it so far above the earth boggled my mind. Ferris tightened his grip on me. That's a good omen. I'll take it, I said, a hand pressed over my heart. My heart, though, was in the mountains with Zane and Eric. With my daughter. I'll come back for you, Marcella. No matter what happens, trust in that.